Welcome to our hybrid City Council study session. And tonight we are missing member Anderson, and his family has just added another baby girl to their life, and so tonight he's taking off. So with good reason, right? And member Russell requested, and I'm thankful for this, that we just have a moment of silence for those in Afghanistan tonight, particularly our American soldiers that are still there, citizens who are there, and those who have been so incredibly helpful over the long 20 years, and those that are in harm's way. So I'm going to ask just to take a moment of silence for about 30 seconds or so. Thank you. We wish peace for all of us. Tonight, we have a number of really important items on our agenda, and I know there are a number of people here regarding parks, as we see in the back with the sign. And I just want to let people know, if you've never been to a study session before, this is where we really just talk and deliberate some of the ideas that have been proposed tonight for a number of things on our agenda, and there won't be time for the public to speak up. That'll be at another meeting when we bring forward anything that we might be voting on. So we don't vote on anything tonight. It's more of a dialogue and figuring out sort of the push and shove of finding the best common ground. So our first agenda tonight is our agenda item 1 is July monthly financial report. This is informational, and our Director of Finance, Jackie Loh, is here to discuss the monthly financial report. Thank you, Director Loh.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I will review the 2021 July financial report with you tonight. Through July 2021, the city's general fund received total $35.6 million revenue that are 67% of budgeted revenue, and the total revenue year to date is probably 12.3% higher than the same time last year. The sales use tax totals $19 million, which is approximately $1.4 million higher than the same time last year. Of the $1.4 million variance, $300,000 is due to closing a liability account, and additional $500,000 is due to the sales use tax audits and a voluntary disclosure collections. The marijuana tax accounts for $1.4 million at the end of July, which is $125,000 higher than the prior year. One of the large retailers had a $441,000 outstanding balance at the end of June. Since then, the retailer paid $148,000 on July 20th and August 20th. The ending balance will be paid off by either September 20th or when the state signs off the license transfer due to sale of business, whichever is earlier. And for the other positive variances, please review the narrative. Here are the sales use tax revenues collected by top revenue sources. You can see the marketplace facilitators and miscellaneous specialty retail store are the two top revenue sources. This slide shows sales and use tax revenues collected, and the year-to-date July collected are higher than the numbers collected before COVID. You can compare the July 2021 numbers to July 2019 numbers. And the slight upticks in July in taxes reported are largely due to one company that makes a 5-figure payment in July. And this is a cumulated change in sales use taxes collected since 2017. Regarding expenditures, the year-to-date expenditures are $31.8 million, or 54.2% of the fiscal year. The total expenditures year-to-date are $2 million higher than those of 2021. Let me, the timing, the variances are largely due to timing in IT, public works, and police, and community development is $330,000 under the 2020 amount due to more COVID-19 related small business loans paid in 2020. Also, here's a summary of 2021 general fund transfers. Through a series of budget supplementals, we transferred $165,000 into the general fund and transferred $10.9 million out of the general fund. This is a fund balance. You can see the 2021 year-to-date deficit is $7 million. That includes an operating surplus of $3.8 million and a $10.8 million transfer out. Then you can see the reserve, which is unassigned fund balance, and the remaining later, $16.2 million, and the reserve policy requirements, $8.75 million. We rolled over the $3 million loan for stormwater fund at the end of July because we received a close to $10 million cash proceeds from the $10 million revenue bond. This is a year-to-date sales use collection by area. You can see area 3 and area 7 are two large areas. And here's are the tax collected by area. We also include in the appendix, we include the areas, the description areas in these reports. So which concludes my presentation for tonight. Do you have any questions about the July financials?
Thank you, Director Loh. Council, any questions? Councilmember Russell.
Thank you. Director Loh, on the general fund revenues, why is the intergovernmental revenue so high?
Thank you for raising this question. You remember we received ARPA funding, and in June we received half of the total $8.7 million. We recorded $1,560,000 according to the lost revenue provision. Based on the formula, we can apply, of the $8.7 million, we can apply $3.2 million to the lost revenue in 2020. But we only recorded a $1.5 million to fund deferred capital projects.
Okay, and so that's why it was put in intergovernmental revenue.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Wink, and then Cuesta.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Loh, for this update, monthly update. Quick question about the retailer that was behind on tax payments by $400K or so. Without requiring many more details from you, are they on track?
Yes, they
Okay.
submitted a payment plan.
I remember.
The remaining outstanding balance of $148,000 will be paid off either by September 20th or when the state transfer their
Correct.
license,
Okay.
whichever is earlier.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Councilmember Cuesta.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Loh. I appreciate the presentation. And my question is regarding that outstanding retailer as well. It sounds as though we've tied it to a particular date in September or the transfer of the state license. Has the local license transferred yet?
I'm not quite sure, but our revenue supervisor, Heather Driscoll, is online. Jay, could you, yeah. She can give you more details.
And I'd be, if you happen to know city manager or Madam City Attorney. Thank you.
Ms. Driscoll, I can see you're unmuted, so you want to go ahead?
Sure. So the new retailer has a license. However, the previous or the current owner still has their license as well. So they're good to go with us. They just have to wait for the state transfer to occur with that. So the new retailer had put that the date of the sale would be, or the liability date was 8/1. So that's why we assumed it was that date of the sale. But with the state, there's a little bit of a backlog with the hearing officer that it has to go through. So once that occurs, it'll be in good shape with us. And so, yeah, the agreement is, should that come in sooner, we'll get that transfer happening, and the new folks have already been signed off and are ready to go on our side as well.
Thank you. And I don't want to explore what ifs for too long, but it sounds as though the local license is transferred. We're waiting for a transfer at the state level. I believe there was a lien in place. If that balance was not taken care of or fully paid off, when that state license transfers over, does the lien carry over with the license, or is it particular to the business?
So the lien can be transferred with the business. And so how the Inglewood Municipal Code is written is that a business, when it's sold, the new owner becomes liable for any owed taxes or anything like that to the city. So we would receive that anyways, but that lien does follow the business. And so if, let's say, for some reason, the transfer was to occur before we get that final payment, then that lien would follow. However, the agreement that we have with these folks is that if the transfer comes in, they're going to give us the check, and then we'll sign the transfer paperwork, and then I'll go and release the lien at that time.
Very good. Thank you for the additional information, Ms. Driscoll.
Sure.
Thank you. Anybody else? Looks like we're all okay. Thanks for your presentation.
Great, thank you.
Moving on to agenda item 2, which is our Parks and Recreation Commission Subcommittee off-leash data and recommendations. This is informational tonight, and we've set aside 20 minutes for presentation and 45 minutes for discussion. Our Director of Parks, Recreation, Library, and Golf, Christina Underhill, and a Manager of Open Spaces, Dave Lee, and Code Enforcement Manager Dave Lewis are here to discuss the Parks and Recreation Commission Subcommittee off-leash data and the subcommittee recommendations for the off-leash program. So welcome. I think that some of our citizens found out that we have lots to read every Monday night, and this is one of those that added pages to our reading.
Well, thank you, Mayor and Council. With me tonight, like you mentioned, we have daily.
You can
open
pull it
space.
closer.
Yeah.
I don't know, it just seems a little bit muted tonight, doesn't it? But if
How
you
about
pull it
this?
close, you're
Is that
fine.
better?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
great.
All right, great. Dave Lee is with us. He's our open space manager that oversees our parks. Kate Truesdale is with our Parks and Recreation Commission and part of the subcommittee. And then Dave Lewis with Code Enforcement is here as well. And again, this is for information and discussion this evening. No decision will be made tonight. I will be reviewing the POCO random survey that we sent out to our residents, as well as the open survey, and then the task force poll results. So that'll be part of the presentation this evening. Let me get to our slides. There we go. All right, so the history of the off-leash program really started back in 2001. Oops, sorry, thank you. It started in 2001 when there was a change to Title VII, Chapter 1A, requiring all dogs to be on leash when away from the premise of the owner or the keeper. And then in 2002, in response to residents wanting off-leash and dogs to be in parks, a pilot program was launched allowing dogs to be off-leash in 5 designated parks, which was the Northwest Greenbelt, Jason Park, Centennial, Duncan, and Bates Logan. And then in 2003, Bates Logan Park, due to controversy and issues happening with the off-leash and conflict within the park, it was removed as part of the pilot program. It was not designated as an off-leash park. In 2006, Canine Corral was developed and opened at Bellevue Park as our first official fenced dog park. And then in early 2020, we had a lot of requests coming in from Emerson Park to become an off-leash designated park, along with an increase of citations, which led to further analysis of the off-leash program. And at that time, the Parks and Recreation Commission presented council with some modification recommendations to the program. After that meeting, which occurred in July of 2020, a task force was recommended to be developed and formed to take a deeper dive into the overall off-leash program in Inglewood. So these are the list of task force participants, as well as the meeting dates when the task force did meet. The highlighted members are the ones that took part in the June 9th meeting, and that is where we took a poll of the recommendations which you'll see tonight. We knew we weren't going to have a full consensus for all the recommendations. We figured I'd give you another idea with data of what people were comfortable moving forward with or not. So this is a map of Inglewood, and highlighted are the parks that we have off leash. And Emerson and Cushing are the new parks that are in the orange there. And Centennial is being proposed to remove due to conflicts between off-leash dogs and other park activities. So in January of 2021, as a result of the task force meetings, we developed a survey that POCO and the National Research Center helped us develop, and that was sent out to 5,000 Inglewood homes. Of those 5,000, we had 520 responses returned. And just the key findings that were highlighted when we presented council with these results in May of 2021 found that about half of the residents felt the dogs can be off leash but need to be in a fenced area, whereas 23% said that dogs can be off leash with no fence required. At least 60% of the respondents strongly or somewhat supported a fenced off leash dog area park in Emerson, Cushing, Duncan, and Jason parks overall. And of those that responded, at least one dog lived in their home. So 40%, and of those, 40% had actually used some of our off-leash areas. And most Inglewood residents that use city parks value the maintenance and cleanliness, which will come into play as we discuss the maintenance of off-leash areas. So this slide is highlighting the proposed parks and what people were comfortable with. If it would be a fenced area at Cushing Park, Jason Park, or a one fence at Duncan Park, or potentially having no fence at Northwest Greenbelt and no fence at Emerson Park. So you can see that, and I'll highlight that a little further here in this slide. So this is comparing the random sample survey with the open survey. And you can see that more than half recommends or supports off-leash in a fenced area. There is a document in your packet with information of dog parks along the Front Range. Located in city parks, all but 2 parks have some sort of fence in place for their off-leash areas. There's 2 that do not, and that's Westminster, which has a 420 acre dog park, and then Boulder, which implements a voice and sight tag requirements in their parks to allow dogs to be off-leash. So here's the first poll result that we took of our task force, and that was regarding hours. And so the question was, should the hours remain to be 6 a.m. to 11 p.m.? And 5 out of 9 suggested yes, that should be the off-leash hours. 4 said no. The current program is currently in the winter of 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. And then when we hit springtime, the end of February, we moved to 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and then 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. And there's some areas such as Duncan and Jason Park that have other programming, sports, youth programming, and various rentals that occur, and so that does impact our off-leash. The first park we're going to look at is Cushing Park. Now, this park is recommended through our master plan to install a fenced dog park at this park. And the area that we're recommending would be on the west side of Inca, south of Dartmouth there. It's a passive area. We don't really have any other plans to use this. It's close to the roadway, close to railroad tracks. It's a great location. It's just under an acre that we can allow off-leash. One item that we mentioned to our task force is wood chips versus grass. In this particular area, like you experience at Canine Corral, we don't have irrigation. So we're recommending moving forward with wood chips at this park. The POCO survey, 77% of the residents strongly or somewhat supported a fenced area at Cushing Park. The open survey, 80% of the respondents also supported this. When we asked the task force, it was unanimous. 9 out of 9 said yes, this is a good location for a dog park. And then when we asked the task force about do we allow just small dogs, just passive dogs, small and passive, or all dogs, 6 of our task force members recommended all dogs be allowed to go to this off-leash park. Now, the Northwest Greenbelt is somewhat unique. We don't have very many issues at this. We don't get a lot of calls or complaints regarding off-leash dogs at the Northwest Greenbelt. 42% supported off the random sample survey of allowing this to remain an off-leash park with no fence. As the open survey also said, 67% supported it. And then the task force, 8 out of 9, said yes to allowing this to stay as is. Canine Corral, we do not propose any changes to this. It will remain our off-leash park. Ongoing maintenance, improving the wood chips, and overall conditions will be Park's goal. So Jason Park, what we're recommending is a fence along the north side of the playgrounds to separate the activities on the south side of Jason with the north side activities, which was off-leash, and then the multi-use field. Jason Park will receive some renovations in 2022, and we are proposing adding a sidewalk access that would go all the way back to the multi-use field with a gate. Also proposed was a temporary fence to separate the multi-use field with the open off-leash area. And so we would be programming specific days out of the week that fence would be up to allow for our youth sports programs to use that multi-use field, and then work with Pirate Youth Sports on what those days would be, and then the off-leash would get those remaining days. And so the total acreage with the multi-use field is 4.2 acres that would be usable by our off-leash program. So the POCO results show in the random sample survey that the majority of respondents supported an off-leash fenced dog park at Jason. That was 66%. The open survey, 47% supported an off-leash area, and then 53% strongly or somewhat opposed an off-leash fenced area at Jason Park. And so we took this information back to our task force and asked if they agreed with the proposal for a fence on the north side of the playground there, and 7 of our task force members agreed and 2 did not. And then we asked about the temporary fence between the multi-use field and the open off-leash space at Jason, and that was split 50-50. The one thing with the fence, it will help us in maintaining the turf. We do rent a fence when we do need to close the park for maintenance, so installing a permanent fence would help cut some of the cost over time. Moving on to Dunn Park. Duncan, like Jason, is used for youth sports programming. One recommendation that we proposed in the survey, as well as the task force, was putting up a fence to separate the playground and activity area from the off-leash area. The open space could still be used for programs, and the leashes would be required on the south side of this park. So the POCO random sample survey, 60% supported a single fence at Dunn Park. From the open survey, another 60% supported that. When we asked the task force, should Dunn Park have an off-leash area on the north side of the playground, 3 said yes, and 5 said no. Should Dunn Park have a fence separating the off-leash and open space from the playground and other park amenities, 5 responded with yes, and 3 said no. Moving to Emerson Park, this would be a new proposal, and these are the questions that were proposed to our task force. So should this be an off-leash park? Should be licensing specific to Emerson versus the rest of Inglewood? Should specific residents X blocks away from the park have only access to this and not all residents? And should the park have specific off-leash hours? Some of the challenges with Emerson, it is smaller, it's very much in a neighborhood, there's no parking, and so that's a challenge that we're facing currently with off-leash dogs in this park, as well as other use of that. And this is an example we provided. It is not set in stone. This is not the boundary we would necessarily have, but if Emerson Park were to have a boundary for licensing and only allow Emerson Park residents, that would be the boundary that maybe those residents could have. So that was just what was proposed to the task force. The northern boundary actually cuts out Denver, so Denver residents technically couldn't use this park for off-leash. Granted, all residents can use it for all programs, just not off-leash. So that's what we presented to the task force. The random sample survey, fewer than half the residents strongly or somewhat supported off-leash dog areas, no fence at Emerson Park. So that's 41%. At least 30% strongly or somewhat opposed an unfenced area at this location. And then the open survey, 69% of the respondents strongly or somewhat supported off-leash areas, no fence at Emerson Park. So now we go to the task force poll results. Should Emerson Park be designated an off-leash park? It was a 50-50 split on this question. Should Emerson Park be for Inglewood residents only? 8 people said yes. Should there be a designated boundary for licensing dogs to be able to use Emerson Park? 4 said yes, 5 said no. And if Emerson Park is an off-leash park, should off-leash hours be from 6 a.m. to 11? Or should they be more like what we have in the spring, which is 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. or 6 p.m. to 11 p.m.? And 5 agreed that the hours should be split, the morning and evening, and 3 said 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. So next is fencing. What type of fence would we use? Not a 6-foot fence. This fence is about 3.5 feet. And this particular fence is our decorative fence, which averages about $105 per linear feet. And granted, we got these quotes a while ago, so they may change slightly. But you can see the cost for the proposed fencing. So a black-coated chain link fence is much cheaper, and you can see the prices for that. When the task force was asked which fence did they prefer, 3 of them recommended the decorative fence, and 5 recommended the chain link fence. One of the questions that came up when POCO came and presented the task force, the poll results, was just park acreage and how it breaks down. So we have just over 134 acres that we manage of open space, and you can see how it breaks down with turf, non-turf, flower beds, native areas, and then water, which water is Centennial Park. It's primarily our lake that takes over that park. So our open space, this will show you our current program. 67.82 usable open space turf acres are available. The current off-leash program is 23.31 acres, which is 34% of all open space. And then the proposed program would be 18.01 acres for off-leash, which is 26.5 of open space acreage. And that includes everything but Centennial. So that would include Cushing and Emerson in that 18 acres that's proposed. So the licensing program, there's really not a big question on this. POCO, the majority people of the surveys responded they would support that. The task force also supported that. That would be a program that would be implemented in partnership with code enforcement and the ranger program along with park staff. Most likely we'd follow something very similar to what Boulder has, which is an educational program. You have to go through a class to get your license and tag for your dog. And then there would be an annual fee as part of the program. And that's what I have up there is the Boulder program that's currently being offered. And a lot of municipalities have looked at that and are offering something very similar to that. Those prices are what they're charging, not necessarily what we would necessarily charge. But when we did ask, a $25 to $45 fee was something that people were very comfortable with paying. And there's a lot of benefits past being allowed to have your dog in off-leash. If your dog gets out, it's a way to find the home of the dog as well. So the licensing program goes much further than just off-leash dogs. So this just shows you that the support for the dog licensing program, it's definitely there and something I think we should definitely look at implementing down the road. Talking about maintenance for off-leash, I've highlighted the 3 areas: cleanliness, having grass, and acreage. Our challenge with acreage is we're a small city and we're landlocked. We don't have a lot of space to expand like other areas in the Front Range like Parker. So we're very limited. Our parks aren't going to grow any larger. We can't add a lot more to the program. So some of the expectations that park staff would have would be allowing weekly closures to mow, check irrigation, just general maintenance. Biannual closures would be required to rest the grass, the turf areas, and do seeding, aeration, topsoil fertilization. And that's something that we've done at Jason Park. You can see this last year. We implemented that exact program to maintain the turf. One of the challenges that all fields have is whether for off-leash or sports is wear and tear. I used to manage a lot of soccer fields, and they would wear down quickly if they were programmed 7 days out of the week. So you have to rest those fields for maintenance and just general use. And then also rotation of closures. So we wouldn't close all the dog parks at one time. We'd ensure that dog areas are open while one is closed down. These are examples around the Front Range of dog parks that are out there. The majority of the off-leash parks, and talking to staff that maintain them, is the struggle to keep grass growing. They're heavily used. We know that. They're popular. And so they have turned to using wood chips or gravel to put into their parks to keep them clean and manageable, and not just dirt when the grass dies off. So those are just some examples that exist. So the rules have been a challenge. We know that there's a lot of park rules, not just in our city, but in many cities. They're confusing, too many rules listed. The hours that were listed for off-leash have been confusing to people. There's not enough signs, there's too many signs. Sometimes there's inconsistency in the signs that we have out there. And so part of the proposal is reviewing the best practices with park rules, exploring the use of QR codes. We're using that a lot in restaurants these days for their menus, and that QR code would lead to all our park rules, not just the few that we may post. And the other goal would be to post possibly the top 5 park rules. Pick up after your dog, carry a leash, dogs must be on a leash if it's not an off-leash park, things like that. And those are just ideas of what could be on those signs. Also, the future enforcement with rangers will be very helpful moving forward. Code enforcement's done a great job to date, but having a ranger in place will be also very helpful as this program is implemented and new rules may be posted. So code enforcement ran some numbers as far as calls for service by park. And this is from 2005 to 2021. 90% of these calls are typically related to off-leash dogs or dogs in general in the parks. And I'll break these down a little bit further. It's a lot to take in there. So here is a list of all the parks and their calls for service. I have the top 6 listed there: Jason, Centennial, Bates Logan, Bellevue, Miller, and Emerson. So you can see Jason has the highest number of calls, followed by Centennial. This breaks down the last 3 years, and this graph here will show you there's been an increase of calls for service over the last few years here, and the stats for 2021 only cover to August 1st. So I'm going to turn this over to Kate Truesdale, who is part of the Parks and Recreation Off-Leash Subcommittee. We also have Mark Husbands. He's on the Zoom call for questions at the end as well.
You turn, the light on, and then pull it up close to you. And
tricky.
Thank you.
All right, can you hear me now? Cool. I'm Kate Truesdale, and I am one of the 3 representatives of the commission that was on the task force for off-leash dogs. And I've been on the commission since 2018 and have been a part of this since the beginning. Just to start off, I'd like to say that on August 10th, me, Mark Husbands, and Stephen Young, who were the 3 representatives, met to discuss and review the discussions that have taken place over the last year and the Polco survey results. While we do appreciate the Park and Recreation Department's work and dedication to finding mutual resolution among all of the parties, we still believe that this is a huge issue and these proposed changes are not necessarily going to be the best thing for the community in resolving this issue. Our discussion, when we had it, we based it on a few things. First of all, we felt that the survey was very much a 50-50 split towards support and opposition of off-leash dogs. Therefore, it's really kind of hard to use that as some solid grounding for the basis of these decisions. We feel personally that the focus of the park should be on the safety of residents and the usability and potential revenue of the parks through rentals and athletic fields. And then we also feel very strongly that putting fencing up and dividing the parks affects that usability and really kind of just creates an eyesore in some of our most beautiful parks. So we met and these following recommendations, we presented them to the full Parks and Rec Commission on August 12th. So I'm just going to run through them and let you know what they are. So first of all, if you want to go to the next slide, thank you. We think that the Parks and Recreation Department should develop a comprehensive plan and secure funding for new enclosed off-leash dog parks at both Cushing and Jason. As Director Underhill mentioned, the Cushing Park was in the 2017 Parks and Recreation Master Plan. It was also the most supported off-leash dog park situation within the Polco surveys. During the task force meetings, Jason Park was the most controversial discussed park. It was just, people just really couldn't get to a mutual agreement. So therefore, we do feel that we should create a enclosed off-leash dog park in Jason Park. However, we're leaving the decision on where this should be up to the Parks and Recreation Department, and we think that it should be determined by the cost and ease of maintenance. By creating these two new enclosed off-leash dog parks, there will be 3 total in the city, and they'll be pretty nicely spread out so everyone will be able to use them. We feel that off-leash dog privileges should be eliminated at Centennial and Duncan Parks. These are some of the parks that have had the most complaints for dangerous and at-large dogs. These parks have athletic fields, rental shelters, and playgrounds, and if we eliminate off-leash privileges, it'll ensure that all of Englewood citizens can safely use the parks, and the Parks and Recreation Department can maximize potential revenue. We feel that the Northwest Greenbelt should remain an off-leash dog park. It was rarely mentioned in our discussions with the larger task force and doesn't have a strong history of at-large dog issues. So therefore, we think we could just let it be as it is. However, if City Council feels that we should just make things pretty clear on on-leash and off-leash, we do support this becoming fully on-leash. Emerson Park, we think, should remain on leash despite the community having lots of feelings of this becoming off leash. This is primarily because it's a very small park and the neighborhood is right on top of it. There's not a lot of room for parking if people were to show up. And, just for consistency within the off leash program, we think that this should remain on leash. We are very supportive of the licensing program, and we encourage Parks and Recreation Department and Code Enforcement to do this. The one concern we did have was with the pricing, so we encourage the department to create a scholarship program for our citizens that might not be able to afford that year to year, but still would like to be participants in off-leash dog parks. And then finally, this is kind of our biggest thing. We really would like to encourage City Council to make a final decision regarding this off-leash dog program and issue and implement those changes on January 1st and express it to the whole community. We've been having this conversation for over 20 years, and it's about time that we move forward with it. We just personally feel that the proposed recommendations by the Parks and Rec Department is not going to be sustainable for our city as it continues to grow and develop, and we think that it will create more ambiguity regarding the program, unnecessary and costly work for the Parks and Recreation Department, and ultimately prolong the off-leash dog park issue.
So we took Kate and Mark and Stevens, the subcommittee's recommendation, and compared what they're offering to the original proposals. And with their proposal, removing Duncan, Centennial, and Emerson, that gives off-leash 15.76 acres, which is 23.2 of open space acreage versus the current program of 34, or the recommendation that we just provided from the Parks and Recreation side, task force of 26.5. So it takes away 3% with this proposal. This is the implementation timeline that we're recommending. We're recommending a potential vote in September. Education of the new off-leash program would begin in October and run through February. The new off-leash program would take effect in January 1st. and then the enforcement of the off-leash would begin March 1st. So we'd be able to educate our public and the users of our park to know what the program is going forward before summons or other issues would be given. So with that, I just want to thank our task force and the residents that have spent many hours on Zoom meetings going through everything off-leash related, as well as our Parks and Recreation Commission members for reviewing the surveys and the data and developing recommendations, as well as listening to the concerns of our residents for the last 19 years. As staff and fellow dog owners, we understand the trends in our parks are changing. Dogs are part of our family now, more now than ever before. They're our kids, so we have new residents entering our city every single day. With some of the new developments coming online, there's estimations of 1,000 new residents. If 40% of those have dogs, that's 400 new dogs coming to our city. And so we have to be ready for that and willing to have a program that's in place that's safe for all residents to enjoy our parks and something that we can maintain for years to come. So we're happy to answer any questions and discuss and then decide when we want to bring this back for a vote if council is ready.
Thank you, and I too want to thank you, Ms. Truesdale, and others that you served with. This was not an easy process. You've gone through a lot. You probably will never want to do anything like this again, but I cannot thank you and the rest that have been there, and particularly for those who are willing to really stay at the table and try and find some ways to get to a final agreement on some recommendations. I appreciate it. It's not unnoticed by us all. All right, so we're here with some questions. I think Councilmember, Cuesta, I guess, is first, according to Mrs.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to thank the group, too. I know a tremendous amount of work went into this, and also to the community. I imagine I'm not the only one who received a fair amount of communications over the past weeks and months, and so we do appreciate so many perspectives coming in. Can we go back to the diagram of Jason Park as it was proposed? And, we've been discussing the idea of a fence or not a fence at Jason Park for some time, and I think this is the first time I've seen a visual of it. And so what's being proposed is just the blue line along the north side as a permanent fence. The yellow down the middle would be a temporary fence. Am I just to start there? Am I understanding that correctly?
Councilmember Cuesta, you are correct.
Okay. When would the yellow fence be used? What is the timeline of that again?
So the proposal would be that would be put up when we rent the field out to Pirate Youth Sports or other organizations. And the goal would have specific days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That's when practices and games would be, and that's not what it will be per se, but just an example. And then the other days, the fence would be down, so that whole space would be used for off-leash.
Would that be year-round? I'm assuming in the winter, Pirate Youth Sports is not out there?
Correct, and that's something we would consider.
I'm sure it's very hard for you to estimate. I'm going to put you on the spot anyways, Director, and I appreciate it. We've got 365 days in a year. How many days of the year do you think that yellow fence might be up?
If we do, I would say half for sure. If we split the use of sports fields, field usage with off-leash usage, it may be more than that for off-leash, especially in the winter months when the park's not in use.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. I also want to be a little bit pedantic, if so, to thank every citizen, Ms. Truesdale and your team, thank our Parks and Rec Department, and thank our citizens who've been so engaged in this topic and in sharing their views with us. So, not easy decisions, but I'm certainly grateful for the input of all of you. So I have a couple of questions to start for Parks and Rec, our team. I do agree with you, Ms. Truesdale, on your response to the survey, even though for different reasons. The main objective of a survey instrument is to obtain relevant information that's taken in the most reliable and valid manner, and the accuracy and consistency of a survey form. The survey forms these two significant areas, the validity and the reliability. And this relates to all aspects of research. So even within those in the scientific field that know psychometric theory, who understand how to test for validity and reliability, they sometimes struggle in selecting those tests to establish those two critical pieces. And for those who don't know, validity refers to how accurately a method or a test actually measures what it's intended to measure. So an example, if a survey is intended to measure the success of an off-leash program, but the questions actually measure whether people like fences or not, that shows a lack of validity. And then reliability indicates the degree to which the research method or the test, the instrument, produces stable and consistent results. And the easiest example of this, which we always use, is a scale. So if I step on a scale 5 times in 5 seconds, and the scale gives me 5 different readings, it's not a valid measure of our weight, right? So there are different measures of validity in survey instruments, and by no means do I intend to be disparaging toward our staff, but I presume no one from Parks and Rec who developed the survey tested for reliability or validity. And I say this because when it's conducted, a detailed description of the tests along with the results are always included in the final report. And so tonight I would like to firstly confirm that the survey instrument, although being labeled as scientific, was not tested for validity or reliability. Is that correct, Mr. Lee or Director Underhill?
Councilmember Wink, that's why we worked with the National Research Center in Poco we sent them the questions and they developed the survey out of those. And they were looking at everything that you just mentioned for the survey results.
Are you 100% sure on that?
That was-
Actually,
Yeah,
yeah, for reliability and validity.
correct.
Good. Now, based on your recommendations tonight and recognizing that behavioral patterns are affected by scenarios of confinement, how much input did we have or receive regarding from canine behavioral experts or SMEs in terms of the fencing, the non-fencing, those types of changes to some of our parks?
I would refer to our code enforcement supervisor, Dave Lewis, who actually falls into that category of an expert in dog animal behavior.
Manager Lewis, thank you.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Wink, in conducting research and with one of our resources, specifically at the State Office of Humane and the Department of Agriculture, we're not aware of any formal valid survey or results or study that's been conducted that states that fencing would have a negative impact on dog behavior.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Lewis. Those are my questions for Parks and Rec. Thank you, Mayor.
All right.
I'll pause until later on.
Great. And Councilmember Quest, I just want to make sure, was that light on because you want to go after, or? Okay, great. Mayor Pro Tem Sierra.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll ask one question and then cede the floor to others. So since we're on the adjacent park slide, I needed to just ask this question, and I think you kind of answered it, Director Underhill. In terms of if we were to go to this type of model where we do have the temporary fence and the permanent fence, how likely is it that that area, the off-leash area, would actually stay grass? Or would it become dirt at a certain point? Like, I know that we are stating that there's going to be a couple times a year where there is going to have to be maintenance, and for several weeks at a time, but would that be enough in order to keep the grass growing in that area?
That's a great question, and we would do our best to keep grass in that area. I can't promise that it would stay that way, but like we mentioned in the maintenance section, that we would anticipate closures, and it may be something you have to close it more than biannually. It might have to be closed for a few weeks out of the year, maybe bi-monthly, just to keep the grass growing. One of the biggest challenges to keep grass and turf healthy is the winter months. The grass goes dormant, and if you walk on it consistently, it does kill the grass. And so coming back in the spring, like we've experienced this last year, it is hard to get the grass to come back, and so we have to do additional maintenance on that. So no promises we can keep it looking exactly like it looks today, but again, the goal with that temporary fence is to spread out the usage so it's not 100% use in that east side of the park.
Councilmember Russell.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of questions for right now. The first one goes back to the Polko survey, and I noticed that when we went through the Polko survey before, that there were questions asked from people that don't even use the dog parks or don't have dog parks. So when the answers came in, did they throw out the answers by people that wouldn't have used that at all?
Councilmember Russell, no. Every survey we received for the statistically valid, the random sample survey, those survey results were kept, as well as the open survey. We didn't throw any results back unless they were duplicated results.
All right, thank you. And then for the task force, did you allow for public comment at any of the task force meetings? Could the public come and present at the task force?
No, there was not public comment at the task force meetings. It was just a group of representatives of us from Parks and Rec Commission, Englewood Unleashed, Code Enforcement, Pirate Youth Sports, and I think that was it. Was there any other ones? Parks and Rec Department was there too. But it was just our small group, and we were just trying to, be representatives of our community and really consider all the feedback that we have. I will say that some of the groups had revolving members present, so Englewood Unleashed, almost every single meeting had a different person there. I don't know if that necessarily would quantify as public comment or inconsistency. I personally felt like not having consistency of the people there was difficult to deal with because we weren't able to really effectively come to a decision together.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'd have one other question right now, and this is for Code Officer Lewis, and it goes back to those illustrations of calls to the parks over the last couple of years.
Which one would you like us to bring up first?
Let's see, my pages aren't numbered. So Code Enforcement calls for service by park, and then that one there is fine too. So my question is, one of the statements that was made was about the number of calls, that 90% of the calls were for dog calls. There were several council requests over the last year and a half, and never was this shown to us. And the fact that there were very few dog calls that were shown to us is a little bit disconcerting, that we were never given this information in the last year and a half. And it wasn't broken down. Is that because the software that we were using at the time is not able to break down calls specifically?
I apologize if you didn't receive a thorough breakdown of all the information. The council request that came forward and information that was asked of the codes division was not inclusive of that. Typically it involved dog bites, or it involved off-leash violations within a certain period. This is not all encapsulating, but all of the data going back to 2005 that our former system used. We're on a new system as of May 1st of this year. 90% of the reported cases within this historical data, or even if you went into the next one, typically involves some type of an animal complaint. And so this is where code enforcement took a specific action that needed documentation, whether we interacted with an owner because of a violation related to an off-leash rule, or if it was a dog bite, or if it involved dogs versus wildlife.
So I appreciate that, but the one question I'm asking is, and I understand that on the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee, we just got the number of calls. So is this generally a breakdown from those charts that we were getting in 2020 and 2021 before we instituted the new system?
Yes, and some of the former system, it required hand counting. So some of the detailed information needed to be reviewed on a case-by-case individual scenario. And so when that information was being presented to the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee, that was done on a monthly basis where we would review, and then we'd categorize those different animal-related calls for service in those statistics that were presented to Code Enforcement Advisory Committee.
Okay, thank you very much, and I do appreciate your work for the committee and Parks and Recs Department and Code Department also. Thank you.
I think we have a few more, but I'd like to ask a question to, since you're talking, Manager Lewis, about the calls. I mean, they went up significantly from 19 to 20 to 21. Do you have a sense about what that might be about? That's an awfully big jump. And then secondly, I mean, I'm assuming COVID, more people in the parks, but I don't know if there's other things. And then secondly, is it possible to know if there's any time patterns throughout the day when it's worse?
To the first question, as to the jump in numbers between 2018 and current, if you'll recall, this body authorized an additional code enforcement officer that was brought on in 2018-2019 timeframe. So that's when we saw an increase of proactive enforcement activities by adding that additional staff member. If you also remember back, that's when some of the more passionate conversations were taking place amongst this body, as well as with some of our advisory committees from code enforcement to Parks and Rec. And so those conversations really permeated into our community and into our social media. And so that was a tremendous spike within our calls for service because it became more sensitive to the community, where we did see more calls from several of those parks when community members were utilizing the parks, or in the case of Emerson Park, typically it was those that lived on the park that perceived violations or safety concerns that they would contact code enforcement.
So you think they were spurred on to call because they had more interaction with you all?
I think it was more of a conversation. It was also seeing our physical presence more in the parks, allowed for more conversations and more activities. We also saw that spike in calls for service between Emerson, Jason, and Bates Logan because we were in those parks, and it became very sensitive to the community. Conversations, people coming before council to have these conversations spurred on a lot of that, those calls for service. As far as days and times, I'm not able to quantify that based on our old system. Based on my training and experience, a lot of the calls for service that we received typically were in the late afternoon, early evening, when several folks were going out, and citizens and visitors were utilizing the parks with their animals after working long periods, or their dogs might have been inside.
Thank you. I think it's Councilmember Ward or Questa is next.
And Mr. Lee, if I can circle back to, I appreciate Mayor Pro Tem's question on the turf. Can we go back to the Jason slide that had the hypothetical fences up? And this is something that crossed my mind. I know that one of the reasons that some folks don't prefer Canine Corral over in Bellevue Park is that it doesn't have the grass that you get at Jason. And Jason's pretty. I know that everybody has received the emails from citizens, and there may be the perception that council members don't make it out to parks, but I assure you we do from time to time. And Jason is a pretty park. I like it. I'm there often enough myself. And I certainly see how the grass is enticing for folks to get there with their dogs. So I don't see how the blue fence would necessarily be, just from a turf perspective, impactful to the turf. Is that safe to say?
Really, the only the only impact that might have is with the irrigation system.
Interesting. Would it block it? What would the
Depending
impact
on
be?
where the heads are
I see.
located, close to the fence, that's a potential, yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you, sir.
But I believe the blue fence was drawn in there to separate the pavilion, the playground, the basketball court, and so forth.
Okay,
And
very
that's
good.
why it was a permanent fence.
And then with the yellow, the temporary fence, that would have the impact on the turf because obviously it just decreases the area, then you've got more use in the smaller area.
Correct, during the times that we'd have athletic events out
Sure.
there, which is typically March through October.
Okay. And so then, of course, to offset that, we would have to close, at a minimum, the east side of it so that you can give it the break, reseat it, as you guys were mentioning. Is it possible that during the times that the east side is closed, the west side would be open? Or would there be periods where the entire park is closed down?
I think that's difficult to say right now. Depends on the wear on the field as well. There's a potential that it could, but I would be hopeful that it wouldn't.
Okay, very good. That is what I have for now. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Sierra? Oh, is yours on? Member Wink? I don't think so.
Nope, it's me. I thought I saw it on, but it's just a reflection. Okay, so actually, that's a great question. Member Queston is going to pass the kudos back over to you. But so then, in terms of the fencing at Duncan Park, do we run into the same irrigation issue?
Yes, that's potential.
Okay. And then I guess a question now for Manager Lewis. Going back to the site, so I'm still a little bit confused in terms of how many of those calls, the 3-year slide, how many of those calls were dog related versus just noise in the park or any other type of code issue?
Approximately 90% involve some type of an animal-related call.
Okay. And then I guess one last question, and then I'll let Member Russell ask a question. So then how many serious issues have we had at the parks over the last 3 years, 5 years? Do we have those numbers?
I do. Over the last 5 years, in all of our parks, we've had approximately 61 animal attacks, what we would consider dangerous dogs or at-risk animal behavior.
Information over what time frame?
5 years.
Thank you.
Councilmember Russell?
Thank you. I do have a question about the turf, but to that, the 61 and a lot of dangerous dogs, how many of those dogs have been adjudicated as dangerous?
To go back to the 5 years, I don't have that information, but I can tell you that currently we have 9 adjudicated registered dangerous dogs in the city of Inglewood.
So those adjudicated dogs are not even allowed in public parks, correct? Via code?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then the turf at Jason Park, have we replaced the sprinkler system in Jason Park?
Sprinkler system's almost 40 years old, or is 40 years old.
So it could very well be that a lot of the turf issues are because of the sprinkler system rather than the dogs.
Well, we certainly have issues out there, but if you go out there now and we have not had a lot of rain, I think it looks pretty darn good. So it holds up.
Right. So, I mean, I've been down there a couple of times in the last few weeks. So thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Mayor Pro Tem Sierra?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess this question would be, I believe it would be for you, Ms. Truesdale. And thank you very much to you, Mark, Stephen. I know that you've been serving since I came onto council, so it's been at least 3 years. So you've become a minor celebrity in Inglewood just for all the work you've done on the Parks and Rec Commission. So I guess my question then is going back to you provided the slide in terms of how many off-leash dog areas we have like within our 30 miles or so. I think you only listed 2 cities that actually have off-leash areas that aren't fenced, and they're much bigger acreage. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I think actually Director Underhill created that, but I believe it was Westminster has one, and then Boulder, but Boulder's more of like an open space area, so you can like go hiking and do things like that. It's not necessarily city confined.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Cuesta?
Thank you, Mayor. Director Underhill, can I have you return to the slide that had the call numbers on it, please? One of the things that stood out on this slide to me, and also in the proposal that I think was something I just wasn't expecting, and it might be that I wasn't paying close enough attention, was that Duncan was proposed for an entire alleviation of the off-lease privilege. And as I look down the call rankings here, Duncan's there at 79, same as Cushing. Cushing doesn't even have a dog park. here, where is it? It's beneath Roman's. Roman doesn't have a dog park. It's pretty similar to Rotolo, which doesn't have a dog park. So that to me, comparably against the other parks, it's not on the upper end of the calls that it's received. I'll beg your pardon, Ms. Truesdale, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. Can you give some of the background on how the conclusion was reached to recommend the entire removal of off-leash privileges at Duncan, as opposed to, say, a fence or other alternatives?
Yes, definitely. So, I think that the commission, our biggest feelings is just that all of the parks that are for off-leash dogs should be enclosed. And especially with Duncan, there's field there and there's a playground there, and it's a little bit smaller, so we just feel like that's not a place that's sustainable to have off-leash dog program.
I'm
and
sorry.
we also feel like the fence, like that's a very nice park, and just putting a fence in the middle, it's kind of goofy. And then also, like, sure, the dogs are supposed to stay on one side, but if all of the family members and the kids are on the south side with the playground, like, how are you going to prevent the dogs from going from one side to the other? We just don't think it really makes that much sense in the whole park space to have that fence in the middle.
Thank you. May I have one follow-up?
Go
on
ahead.
that? Thank you. And this one will be another turf question. So thank you for bearing with me on these. Have you guys had to shut down Duncan Park at all to reseed, just give it a break?
We have not. The traffic at Jason is probably the biggest one, and that's why that's been shut down twice. It's one of those beloved parks, winter, summer. We have all kinds of traffic out there.
Jason, that
At
is referring to,
Jason,
not
yes.
Duncan in this case.
At
Okay, very
Duncan,
good.
no. There's not a big dog, as large of a dog contingency at Duncan as there is Jason.
Okay.
Jason's definitely the most popular.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Sierra.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for clarification, in terms of like the winter and summer hours, they actually don't follow the actual seasons, do they? Is it March 1st versus March 21st? What are those hours based off in terms of dates?
It starts typically March 1st through October 31st. It can go into early November in case there are some rain-out makeup games.
Oh, no, I meant for the hours for off-leash dog parks. Right now, we have them 6 to 11
Right.
during the winter hours.
So in the summertime, the hours change due to the athletic programs out there. That was something that was decided by Parks and Recreation and City Council in 2009.
Thank you for that.
Councilmember Wink. Sorry, and you have two laptops, so that's why all of them were closing them, so I couldn't see it, but I can see it now, or we can, yeah. Anyway,
That makes
go ahead.
sense. Thanks, Mayor. I actually want to ask Supervisor or Code Enforcement Supervisor Lewis to add what seemed to be a comment that was outstanding to Councilmember Russell's question about the 61 aggressive dog reports versus the 7 that.
Yeah,
Right.
I apologize. I didn't want to interrupt you, Councilmember Russell, but in regards to the 9 adjudicated animals, it's important to note when it comes to adjudicated animals, we only have control here within the municipality of Inglewood. Those are 9 registered dangerous dogs in the city of Inglewood. This does not allow us to register dangerous dogs or work outside of the scope of Inglewood. And as you all know, our parks are a big draw to not just Inglewood citizens, but to citizens of Denver, Sheridan, Littleton, and other areas. So we can't ban those adjudicated dogs from other cities from going into our parks. And so that's the only thing that I needed to make sure I clarified, and I apologize for that.
Member Wink, are you finished, or did you have more? No. Okay. Member Cuesta?
I think this is my final question, Mayor, so I appreciate you entertaining me. And it's regarding the Emerson Park, and it appears that the recommendation, and I'll beg your correction, Director Underhill, is that it just remains on leash. Is that the recommendation for Emerson?
That is a recommendation from the Parks and Rec Commission Subcommittee, yes.
And that would be without limiting anybody else's access?
That's correct. It
Okay.
would remain as is, on leash, open to all residents and non-residents.
City Attorney, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. Is it, and this is probably a very broad question with a big answer, but I'm not sure if you can simplify it. It seems to me, I don't like the notion of saying this public park is only open to a certain group of people. Is that something that's even legal?
Well, I actually just sent an email to Director Underhill about that issue. The 14th Amendment does prohibit government entities from discriminating. Everyone's entitled to equal protection under the law. So I was actually curious if anyone at the city had researched that. Of course, I've only been here for 2 months, and this issue has been going on for quite a long time. If the city does wish to proceed, I would like the opportunity to research that to make sure we don't run afoul of the 14th Amendment.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
I think all the lights are off. Is that true? Councilmember Russell?
Thank you, Mayor. And I have a question for Code Manager Lewis, and this may be a little bit uncomfortable, but I had heard that there were reports that code enforcement officers were peeking in windows around Emerson Park. And I'm curious just to know if that's true.
So code enforcement does not have the ability to go into somebody's yard without an exigent circumstance based off of state statute regarding animals, livestock, those types of factors. When code enforcement officers or even police officers go to knock on a door where the mail typically would be delivered, sometimes you can see plainly into a window. Code enforcement does not go out of its way to go peeking and looking into specific windows. I am aware of a specific case, and that was a police officer that was working with code enforcement that did look in a specific window.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, we've had a lot of questions and answers from many people. Thank you for everybody's being willing to, but we need to talk about this. Where do we think we should go on this? We need to bring it back in some sort of a final decision. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem Sierra.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'll start off. I'm not sure exactly where to go from here, but I know I made comments about a year ago when this first started. And I do appreciate all the comments from the public, the work by the committee, task force, Parks and Rec Commission, staff to bring a lot of information to us. About this time last year, I stated that for me, a deal breaker would be expanding the dog parks past their current parks. So to me, that would eliminate doing that at Cushing, would eliminate at Emerson. But the other aspect that I said is that I also don't feel that dog parks should exist in the city as unfenced. So I do believe that there needs to be a fence at any park that we do state should be a fenced area. So, or excuse me, as a dog park. So that's kind of where I stand today. I'm fine with the permitting issue. I think that seems to be a smaller issue in terms of what we're deciding tonight, or not deciding, at least talking about in terms of next steps. But that's, I feel, where I stand tonight.
So permitting, yes, and then when it is an off-leash area, you want it fenced in any places that it's being recommended.
That's correct. That's where I stood, and I got more comments on that as well. I have a lot of concerns in terms of whether or not we'll be able to keep the turf in a state that's actually going to be aesthetically pleasing. Based on the survey, it sounded like a lot of patrons would not visit those parks if it isn't grass. So to me, it kind of defeats the purpose of whether or not we're going to fence something and being able to keep the grass alive in order for people to actually use the dog park. So I do have concerns about that aspect of it, which to me then takes it to the point where all dogs should be leashed if we were going to go to that state. But I'd love to hear comments from everyone else.
Thank you. I have a quick question about materials in terms of the, like Canaan Corral and any fenced areas. How often would the wood chips be changed? I mean, it seems like the corral is just, when it first started, it was great. And of course, Englewood Unleashed was very, very active at that time, really active. And they used to come out to council meetings, give us updates every few months. And then something happened to the group, I don't know what. I'm sure people here know why, I don't know. But it seems like they and I don't know where our place, did we step in and do a lot more without a lot of citizen engagement? Or so how often are those chips changed in relevance to Mayor Pro Tem's question?
We don't change them, we just add to them. They start decomposing because There's
Yeah.
dirt or earth underneath of them. We typically do that twice a year.
Really? Twice
Yes.
a year? Okay. Was that in something and I missed it? Was that in some of this here?
I'm sorry?
Was that in our materials and I missed it? Okay, thank you. I appreciate that info. All right, so Councilmember Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, one of the reasons I've enjoyed Englewood as well as I have in the last 16 years was bringing my doggies to the off-leash park. So I used to religiously go to Jason Park twice a day with my dog when I lived just up the street from it for over 6 years. So I understand all sides of this issue and all of the factors. My strong suggestion to City Manager Lewis and staff is that we do leave Jason Duncan and Centennial Parks off leash. I feel an overwhelming majority of the feedback we've gotten has said that the program of off-leash, which began as a pilot, is indeed successful. We've had a few 9 adjudicated dog cases. It feels like, even with the numbers we have today, that I question whether or not that's reason enough to revoke the off-leash privileges. So I want us to try and work around some of the concerns we have, whether it's for children or the above aging population, maybe by fencing the playground area adjacent. That's a thought. But I think those 3 parks should be off leash. I'm happy to discuss, and the Northwest Greenbelt, sorry. And I'm happy to have a discussion about Emerson. It seems like it should remain leashed, but I'm on leash. Happy to have discussions about that. I want us to get to some resolution. So hopefully all 6 of us, I guess, tonight can propose something to the city manager that enables us to vote on this sooner rather than later. So I definitely support maintaining off-leash for those 3 parks.
Are you suggesting the hours stay the way they are currently too, or what?
That I've been thinking, I think so. I am ashamed to say I don't recall the number of calls for complaints about park goers not adhering to those hours, whether or not that's an issue or a problem we need to, I can't remember, I just can't.
That's why I asked
Does
that
someone
question.
mind refreshing my memory?
I believe there was a council request that came out in the last couple months regarding specific instances at Jason Park. And there were 64 contacts at Jason Park related to animals not adhering, or owners not adhering to the off-leash timeframes.
Okay.
So that was within a very short period of time.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Lewis. Thanks, Mayor. I also think that a few citizens made, in the many emails we received, a few citizens made the suggestion to develop a small dog fenced area at perhaps Cushing, and I don't think it's a terrible idea. I've seen instances where smaller dogs, some toy dogs, some Italian greyhounds, for example, were kind of bullied by bigger dogs, certainly at the Canine Corral. If someone has a puppy and they're ready to take it to a park, it might be nice to have a small area where they feel safe. So I think that's probably a good idea if within the budget for refurbishing Cushing, we do have the funding, and I think we do. I think that would be a nice idea. I think those are my points for now. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Others? Councilmember Russell.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually get a little frustrated that it went on as long as it did, because I felt like, clear back at the beginning, and I greatly appreciate Director Underhill you bringing up the fact that it really all did start with Emerson Park. And I felt like at that time, and I may be wrong, so if you all want to correct me, I felt like there was consensus at that time to not make Emerson and Off-Leash Park because it was not really what the neighbors wanted over there. What I feel the consensus that council came to at that point in time was that Emerson neighbors would have been really happy if they could keep it as an off-leash park for their neighborhood, but it might create problems if we opened that park to those people across the city. And I don't know if that's the reason that the task force came up with what you all came up with, the parking and things like that. So it's not that I'm not sure about that, but I have been hearing, and really all of us really have been hearing for the last year and a half. We get boatloads of email and just wonder, why are we continuing this? And I know at one point we were discussing that we're not going to do anything during COVID, and then the task force moved forward during COVID, so we get to the point where we're doing something about it. I have talked to a lot of citizens. I've been to Jason Park at least 3 times. I talk to people all the time. I got a call this morning from a person from Dunn Park. Her concern about fencing Dunn Park is that the ground is uneven over there, and there are a lot of elderly people that walk their dogs around the park, and if we fence that park, it will be very difficult for them. This person has lived there in that house for 47 years. And what she said about the park is the same thing that I heard about Jason Park when I was down there. People have met lifelong friends in these parks. They love each other. They're picking up after each other. I think that things have probably changed since this whole discussion began 20 years ago, that dog owners are being more responsible. And in the scheme of things, and I've had a few calls, probably 3 people that have been wanting to stop off-leash parks altogether. That's why I questioned the poll call survey, because when you hear from citizens, and that's part of the reason, I wrote an article about this in my magazine article the last time I wrote one, that we were making decisions by special task force in the past year. The reason we shouldn't be doing that is really the 7 of us have been hired by the public to represent them. And I think that is our responsibility, to listen to the public. And so when I know that it's very difficult for task forces, you don't want to spend a lot of time with the public, but these parks really, the taxpayers in this city are the ones who pay for these parks. And if the people can't use the parks, then what's the purpose of having them? I think there's some other issues. If we're going to stop the parks because of density, this council needs to start having some other discussions. We either need to stop the density, or we need to make the new high-density buildings provide parks for their animal lovers, or they cannot have animals in the city. We cannot increase density, and people, the only place they have to walk their dogs is in a park. I just think there are major problems. People love this city. They love it because it has the small town feel. If we stop people and dog owners from using the parks, and the truth is there's 15 parks. If we only keep 3 of them off leash, there are 12 other parks that they could go to take their children if they don't want to be in a park where there's dogs. And I think that problem also is in where we're building massive duplexes. The people that live in those don't have big yards either. So I am in favor of keeping Jason, Duncan, and Centennial off-leash parks. And I would consider a dog park for small dogs, a small area in Cushing Park also. I appreciate that suggestion, Councilmember Wink. Thank you.
All right, others? Member Cuesta, Member Ward? Go ahead, Member Cuesta.
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, I could almost take these piece by piece. I'm not sure that I fall uniform one way across the other, across all parks. You know, for instance, can we go back to the Jason drawing one more time? I appreciate it, Director Underhill. I think I've made you do this 3 or 4 times now. So I certainly understand the yellow fence will be temporary. But I can tell you this, I have definitely heard from folks that would like a fence up. They're going to tell me that blue one doesn't cut it. So I think that there's different sides of this. You know, is that a fenced park? That blue line there? I can tell you that the flip side of this is I think there's people that would say that that doesn't go far enough. So how do we find the compromise? And this is just one example. The blue fence, that doesn't, I don't see that being such an impairment to folks using that park, and I'm there frequently myself, as much as the yellow line. And the yellow lines to me seems to be more an issue with just balancing with youth sports. Is that correct? I mean, that's really what we're trying to preserve, that area is for the youth sports. So that to me isn't even a question more of public safety on the middle line. That's more just making sure that we're balancing the uses and that, you know, kids sports are getting to use it as much as is the dog folks. So this one doesn't, the blue line doesn't bother me at all, actually, truth be told. And I do like the decorative fence far more than the black chain link fence. I think we should keep it as aesthetic as possible. It's the yellow fence that, and it's not so much that I don't see the reason behind it. It's tough to manage those two and to keep the turf in place. So I'm not sure, I'm just not sure how we pull this off. I think I go a bit with Mayor Pro Tem there in that, how do you preserve the grass and preserve everybody's right to be on the grass all the time? And that to me is where you come to a crux that is a bit, it's hard to solve. We can go ahead and pass these and we could have a dead field in 18 months, you know, and then I'll wonder if we really accomplished what we were set out to do. So I don't mind the blue. The yellow, again, the yellow I don't mind on purpose. I just wonder if we're going to be able to preserve the grass and have the yellow line there, or the yellow fence there, you know, call it half the year, as you had estimated, Director Underhill. Does that do any good at all?
No, thank you.
Not really.
Because actually what you're doing is setting us on a direction. Maybe we do need to take these one park by one park and I mean, that's how you all had to sort of do it in your task force too, right? So let's start with Jason Park. Or further comments from Member Ward, if you want to give some perspective, and we can hold on this and just
Sure.
say he's starting with one here.
Yeah, just a few comments. This is a difficult issue for me because I want to honor all the constituencies that work here, and unfortunately, I'm left with a decision that's going to alienate one group or another.
Probably both.
Or both, yeah.
Maybe not, I don't know.
Hey. First of all, I do want to extend my thanks to the Parks and Rec Commission. I serve as liaison on that commission. We had some really good conversations. I came in on March while this was largely finished, this work, but it's been a challenge. It's a challenging issue for them too. I'm sure they get emails and comments at the Parks and Rec Commission meetings. They've heard a few things themselves. My primary concern with any plan for reduction at Jason is the health of the turf. I want to make sure that park stays grass. If it stays grass under the current program, that's great. If it stays grass under a restricted program, that's great. But it needs to stay grass. I was there on Sunday, nice green grass, liked it a lot. Didn't find any dog poo, by the way, Sunday afternoon. I looked, didn't find any. These off-leash dog parks are a unique amenity in Inglewood, and that can be a sign that we're doing something wrong, or it can be a sign that we're doing something right. I like the addition of the Cushing Park. I think small dogs need a place to go as well, and I would suggest that as a small or young dog location. My wife and I just adopted a puppy, by the way, so she'll be out and about in the next month and a half after she finishes all her vaccinations. I did get some feedback on Duncan. I'm wondering if it's possible to fence the entire park so that we have a fenced off-leash park that's made out of grass. I know that plan would be more expensive, but we don't have too many fences around all of our parks. It's just not something that we normally do. And I see in other areas, some parks are fenced depending on where they're located. I'm wondering if that might be a good compromise solution. Because I did get one email today from a person who's had a bad experience just walking his dogs near Duncan and being approached by off-leash dogs. And that is one of my larger concerns, and perhaps Supervisor Lewis can speak more to this, but I want to make sure the parks stay available to all of the users. I want to make sure that the old lady walking the toy poodle down the street is safe from the German Shepherd fetching a Frisbee and getting excited at seeing another dog. And as much as we can do that, I think we'll be accomplishing what the city needs.
Councilmember Ward, can I ask you a clarifying question about, are you talking about fencing it all with the playground in it?
Yeah, just putting one around the whole ring, because that park spans like a block. Couldn't we just?
What would that do to help mitigate dogs after each other and kids?
It would keep the dogs inside, so you could choose to be inside the park with the dogs, or you could choose to walk your dog along the sidewalk and not have to worry about an off-leash dog from inside the park approaching you.
So it's about dogs on dogs, not about any of the children in the park that are at the playground?
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure. All right, others? I guess, bottom line is, and this is to answer your, or maybe a statement, Member Russell, that you made, we held this up. We decided not to do anything during COVID, and it's very clear we said we would talk about it when we got back face to face. And here we are, we're right on time with what they asked them to do. So I don't want you to feel like you have not done what we asked you to do. That's what we asked you to do. We all felt like this was the time not to make major changes while COVID was going on and people are using parks in the way that they're used to doing them, and it's a huge part of their mental health and their life. At the same time, we know that people are using the parks more, and there's probably, I think there's way more interaction, and that's why we've seen these numbers go up, and we're seeing more of the violations because we have people keeping eyes on it, as you mentioned. So bottom line for me is two things. One, we know these parks create community, and there's no question that those that are using them with dogs have a stronger sense of place and community than they maybe have ever had, because they're using them more often, perhaps more so because of COVID, I don't know. Although I know people who have used them for a long time, and I know others that have come new to the game. And then secondly is that, and in that same light, everyone has the right to use our parks without fear of being hurt or without fear of being, feeling like they're going to be harassed by someone or upsetting. And I have received a number of phone calls from the aging population, particularly, who feel like they can't walk in our parks very quickly or very easily. And it's not because a dog is necessarily difficult, they're just enjoy people. And so they come run up to them, and then they feel, I know people who are less stable feel like they're gonna fall over. So they just don't go to the parks anymore, which I find to be very, very sad. So I am in favor of some of the compromises here. I would like us to try a few of them and see what happens. Perhaps we just start with one that we think is our most contentious one and try some things and see what happens. Could we pilot a few things? Could we limit a few hours when we know it's the highest level of unleashed and problematic behavior, and maybe lop an hour off of it? And yeah, I'd like to pilot a few things before we get really into a lot of money. And that would be one of my ideas. So I don't know if Jason Park would be the one, and see what happens when you do a temporary phase. I'm not a big fence person when it comes to, I think, like Ms. Truesdale, you're saying that, you put a fence down the middle of it and it looks awful, it looks silly, and you don't do that in the middle of your yard. These are big amounts of acreage on some of these, so maybe it'll be a little less awkward, but I'd like to pilot a few things. I'd be willing to start with a park or two and see what happens and study it over the next year. And it doesn't help for those who feel, and maybe we just stay where we are, but I could go harder than that if we want. Councilmember Ward.
I just want to note that over and over, I've heard from the Parks and Rec commissioners that the thing that they want most is for us to find a resolution.
Make a decision.
And not keep this ball rolling down the road.
Yeah, I get that, but not always can we do it that way if we're going to be thinking carefully over time, because obviously it's not working right now, so, or at least, yeah. Councilmember Cuesta.
I'd be willing to pilot some of these ideas too, which I think then at least leaves some things intact as they are for now. And we try it at a sample at one park, 2 parks. I'd even be happy with 1. I mean, I'm going to speak as I see it as what I've understood. It seems that Jason is the #1 place that we get the most calls on. I also think it gets the most use. I think it's beloved. I think, as you've stated, it is a place where people go to meet. They have formed their circle of friends at these places, and they don't want to lose that, or really even the aesthetics of it. You know, those places they've come to love. So I think it's very, very delicate how we go about this, so that people feel like they can still go there, and not only are they enjoying themselves, but they feel their pets are enjoying themselves as well. And so if we could get a handle on that one, I almost wonder if a few of these other issues kind of, I don't know, just wash away in some of the other parks. So now, what does that pilot look like? That's probably the discussion we need to have now. But I'd be happy with just starting with 1 park. Doesn't necessarily have to be Jason, but I do think Jason is probably the crux of this conversation here.
In a sense, the piloting would be a decision to keep it a status quo and try some new things out. So, Mayor Pro Tem Sierra?
Thank you, Mayor. I think part of the issue that we have is just the fact that there is no consistency. So to me, to do a pilot would just bring a bit more issues. You know, I live right next to Bates Logan Park, and so there's a lot of off-leash dogs there. And I wonder if it's because, well, about a year ago, you were able to search off-leash dog parks in Inglewood. Bates Logan came up on Google. So that information was wrong, and I'm sure people were doing that because of that reason. But to your other comment earlier, Mayor, I've received a lot of anecdotal information as well from just citizens in terms of they don't visit certain parks because they expect off-leash dogs at that park, so they just stop visiting them. There was also a question in here, and I wish I would have kind of like dug a little bit deeper in with POCO on this, but there was a question in there in terms of how far you are from a park on whether or not you actually visit a park. So it made me wonder, just because I live next to Bates Logan Park, and I have a dog that has rescue tendencies, so whenever there's a dog that comes towards it, it starts growling. And my son backs up behind me, and so it always becomes like a little bit of an issue whenever a dog approaches. But it makes me wonder if there's other people that don't live so close to a park that they just don't visit Jason, they don't visit Duncan, because those are off-leash dog parks. And if they go to another park and they see an off-leash dog park, they're just not going to go anymore. So to me, whenever I do visit Logan Bates and I see dogs off leash, I stay in a certain area, then I head out, because I know that there could potentially be an issue. So it just makes me wonder if all the different rules that we have in terms of seasons, which parks are off leash, I think it just creates a little bit of an issue and just leads to more issues across all our parks.
Great. Member Wink.
Mayor, I appreciate your suggestion of the pilot, and it's oftentimes a really good idea to test something before investing in new policy or the changes. But on this issue, I think we do need to come to a decision and not drag this out for another year. I think the citizens are probably more exhausted than we are. I know I am. But let's try, and I think we've been moving toward making a decision. We've taken time. We've appointed subcommittee after subcommittee, had them meet and decide. Our Parks and Rec staff and Library and Golf have been working very hard on this. I don't know. I think we should make a decision.
All right, Councilmember Russell.
Thank you, Mayor. And I agree with Mayor Pro Tem that I think what the people are looking for is consistency. And I do think we have, we need to make the rules consistent, and then we need to make sure that everyone gets educated, and then the rules need to be enforced. People will obey the rules if they're trained properly and have enough time. And so I think we need to settle this issue now and move forward with that. Thank you.
Thank you. The rules aren't consistent through all the parks. We have 4 or 5 parks. We're talking about different kinds of things. So we don't have off-leash everywhere. That's the problem. And I know when I go to Romans Park, just walking myself, there's off-leash dogs there, and it's not an off-leash park. So I don't know how we get people to, I guess it's continual to have a park ranger. We're going to need that, and continue doing it. So here's my other option. Our other option would be to take park by park. Is there any, I don't think we have consensus because there's 6 of us tonight to actually, I think we might have 3 and 3, but I might be wrong. Are you saying status quo, Member Ward?
Not exactly.
Yeah, I don't think so. And neither is Member Quester, and neither am I. Although I'm interested in shades of it. I don't want to go restrictive. So I don't know if we want to take them park by park and come up with it, or do you want to wait until we have 7 people? We'll have a tiebreaker. Pardon? You've been on. Oh, Councilmember Wink.
Thanks. Are we indeed replacing or backfilling the park ranger position?
I believe so. Is that
We do have a candidate that's in background.
Very good. Okay. And I had one other question. Sorry, go ahead, Member Costa. Maybe it'll come to me. Thank you.
Do you know when Member Anderson is due back?
Well, at one time he said he might be gone 2 weeks, which would be next week, but we're not meeting next week anyway.
Sure.
So it would be coming back on September 7th, which is a pretty full meeting. But we
Thank you.
could, we
I'm
could
looking
have a
at the calendar
special
real quick.
meeting about this too
Sure.
and just kind of hammer it out.
I guess I would say I don't mind going park through park now. I think that even if Member Anderson was here, I doubt any single one of us is going to have an exactly same opinion as the other one. So we could feel it out tonight, which I'm happy to do so.
Yeah. Member Wink?
I think we should wait for Member Anderson.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Sierra?
I'd like to go park by park tonight.
Okay. Member Ward?
Member Anderson and I speak frequently. We're good friends. I think it might be in the best interest of the body to wait until he returns.
Okay. Member Questa, you wanted to go park by park, right? And Member,
That's only effective exercise, I guess, if we would have had 4 people that could have found some consensus tonight. And otherwise, we're probably just back with meeting Member Anderson. I hate to leave a member out on any topic, but this just keeps going on.
Yeah.
This just keeps going on and on and on.
well,
So
if we were
getting
going to do it
would be nice
tonight, I
too.
would suggest that we continue on with our other items because we have people that are here from staff waiting to present and then come back to it after it's over, after we're done with the other stuff. Member Russell?
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to wait for Member Anderson. Thank you.
Okay, is that 1, 2, 3 of you, and then 2 of you saying park by park? So that's up to me. I would actually like to start park to park and see if we can get 1 park done. But that would be 3 of us to 3 of us, and so still we're sort of like stuck. We might as well wait until Member Anderson comes back then. Is that what you're going to say, Member Russell?
Yes, that is what I was going to say. When it's 3 to 3, the issue fails.
Right,
So
right.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
but I was weighing in so you all would know. All right, so I love the
Mayor.
faces here. Yeah, go ahead.
Mark Husbands has his hand raised.
Oh, he does. Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Husbands. You've probably been on waiting for a while. Feel free to jump in.
Not at all. Thank you, and thanks for all the excellent discussion. I did just want to mention though that I think something that and this mainly I think is relevant if you're going to start discussing the individual parks. But I just sort of wanted to mention again that regarding Cushing Park, you know, that's sort of the one case of a park where we don't currently have a facility, but we do have a facility that's described in a master plan. And I would just ask that be part, you know, that the way that it is presented in the master plan be part of the discussion about what happens in Cushing, because I think that's a case where we don't need to treat it as if it's a blank slate, because there is, you know, there has already been considerable deliberation that, you know, went into producing that plan for a fenced dog park at Cushing.
All right, great. Thank you for that reminder. Can we keep that on our topics then? So, I guess since we're sort of split on this, we will table it for tonight, and we'll try to find a time. I think so with that, are you willing to meet another night? Because we have a lot on the 7th right now. Can we extend the time? Are you willing to meet another time? Mayor Pro Tem?
I was going to throw another option out there. So the 13th, I believe, whatever that Monday is after the 7th, we currently don't have really like a city council session. We are currently setting up maybe an executive session that night, a couple of executive sessions. So we actually don't have a study session that night. So we could come back that night as well to pick up the conversation if we didn't want to add another day next week or the week of Labor Day onto our calendars.
That's a great idea too. So that Tuesday, that Monday, it's a Monday night, we are visiting the industrial area. That was a request to have that visit. I think we start at 4:30 that night, and then at one point we had nothing, but then we decided to add the personnel discussions that we've put off that are required by charter to have. And so we would do that and then this. Does that make sense? Does anybody oppose that idea and think they want to do something else? Got some consent here. All right. That's what we'll do then. We'll do the 13th, and we'll come back with all the same info, and hopefully Member Anderson will be here and able to participate, and perhaps we'll see the little baby. All right. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Do you mind if I say something? So
Yeah.
I'm about to disappear, and it's not because of this conversation. I have a babysitter issue here, and got to be back home at 8 o'clock. So if you guys see me disappear, it's not because of the conversation we just had. And lastly, I do want to thank all the work that you guys have done, the Parks and Rec Commission, the task force, all the citizens that have been involved in this, code enforcement as well. I know that you guys are just basically just enforcing the laws that the city council passes. And so you guys get a lot of grief about whether or not you guys are doing too strict of a job or being too lenient on citizens that are breaking the laws in the city. I know that you guys are trying to lead with empathy and then trying to train and trying to get people to understand our laws. And that seems to, you seem to hear it from all aspects of council. So I know that regardless, we're going to be 50-50 in terms of making a decision on this, on whether or not people are going to be upset with us or not. So I just want to thank you guys for all the work that you guys have done. Thank you.
I think we all agree with that. Also, I think many of us have been showing up at parks, and you may not know, or there are those of you that are park users. I sit in my car for several hours at a time just to watch what's happening, and have observed a lot, and it's informed some of my decisions, and have some days seen nothing. So, all right, thank you, everybody. We're going to take a break right now, and we will be back at 5 minutes to 8, according to that clock there. All right, council members are taking their seats. I think Mayor Pro Tem Sear, I'm not sure if he's on yet, but he will be. Oh, he is. Yes, there you are. He's made the transition to his home, so. Our agenda item 3 is is an update and request for feedback on the Oxford Avenue pedestrian design. And Capital Projects and Engineering Manager Tim Hoos and Capital Projects Manager Jacob Warren are here to present and provide an update on this bridge and get feedback on us on the aesthetic characteristics of the design. So thank you for being here, and hopefully we'll be helpful.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Yeah, thanks for having us here. So we appreciate being here. We're going to give you an update on the progress we've made on the pedestrian bridge that we're looking to install over Oxford Avenue between Santa Fe and Navajo Street. The design has progressed to a point where we need to make some decisions on a few different visual elements of the bridge and what you'd prefer to see there, so we can give some feedback to the design team. So we'll be going through both the general design update as well as some different options we can consider for the final design. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jake here, and he'll go through the presentation and show you the various options.
Thank you, Tim. So I'll go ahead and jump into just a quick review of the primary project goals. So with this project, we want to provide a safe crossing of Oxford Avenue for pedestrians near the Oxford and Windermere intersection. We want to increase use of multimodal transportation by improving accessibility to the Oxford Light Rail Station. And this project is part of the Englewood Walk and Wheel Plan and plays a key role in expanding the Englewood bicycle and pedestrian network. And lastly, we want to improve traffic flow on Oxford Avenue by reducing the number of pedestrians and bicyclists that need to cross the street. So on this slide, we have the proposed path and bridge alignment laid over an aerial view of the project site. So in this view, we have our north arrow pointing to the right with the Oxford Avenue and Windermere Street intersection just below the middle of the picture. We have the Oxford Station apartment building on the left half of the image and the light rail station near the right edge of the image. So on the south side of the bridge, the approach is going to use the existing sidewalk ramp to tie into the street side sidewalk. We're also designing the south side approach to allow for a connection to the proposed rail trail, which is planned to continue adjacent to the railroad tracks to the south. On the north side, we have a connection to the street sidewalk along Windermere near the Oxford Light Rail Station. So the consultant reviewed options that included a cast-in-place concrete bridge, a precast box beam bridge, and various prefabricated steel truss bridges. They also looked at each alternative in a single span and two span configuration. And after reviewing each of the potential alternatives, the team settled on a two span truss with an underhung deck, which you can see an example of here in the picture on the slide. So the primary benefits of this structure type are that it's simple and cost effective. These types of bridges are prefabricated off-site, trucked to the project site, and can be set in a single day. The second key benefit is that it has a shallow structure depth. So that's the distance from the surface of the deck to the bottom of the structure. And without this shallow structure depth, it would be difficult, maybe impossible, to make the south side approach path ADA compliant. The lighter steel truss in the two-span configuration allow us to use a spread footing, which lets us avoid the apartment building parking lot and nearby water main infrastructure. And then the last benefit is that this structure type is aesthetically pleasing. When compared to some of the other alternatives, it has a shorter overall profile and an openness that will create a lighter feel both on the bridge and when viewing the bridge from Oxford Avenue. So the consultant submitted a preliminary plan package in May of this year and are currently refining the plans and specs in preparation to submit their final design package in October. Right-of-way plans were approved by CDOT on August 12th, and the project team is currently preparing documents necessary to engage with the nearby property owner about the acquisition near the south approach. So we're on schedule to advertise for construction in November of this year in preparation for construction in spring of 2022. So with that, we'll take a break here and you guys can ask any questions about the design so far.
Thank you. Any comments on the design? Member Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation, gentlemen. Quick question, what is the, and forgive me if it's in the packet and I've missed it, what is the height of the sides of the proposed
truss,
bridge?
like the total truss deck?
How tall is it? Mm-hmm.
It is 7 feet tall.
Oh, okay, perfect, thank you.
So I'll clarify. So the deck is 1 foot 4 inches thick. So the height of the truss, like if you're on the bridge, will be 5 foot 8. Does that make sense?
If I'm standing there from
you're
my
standing on
feet,
the
from where
bridge-
my feet hit pavement,
Mhm.
it'll be 5 feet tall.
8 inches, yes.
8 inches. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Question. Any other questions? I think the aesthetics look great. I think you should move forward on it, so looks like
Okay.
nobody else is. Great work. I'm looking forward to seeing this go up. This is really going to be great. All right.
We've got another piece here.
You have another piece. Yep. Keep going.
So similar to the 285 and Broadway project, we have a couple aesthetic options for City Council to weigh in on. So we'll be looking for feedback on a potential monument feature near the center of the bridge. We'll be looking at using either a wire mesh option or vertical pickets for a bridge barrier. And we'll be looking at a few color options. So here we have a picture from the Oxford-Navajo intersection. This is looking west towards the project site. And this is just to kind of give you context about what it looks like today. And then I have a drawing here, a little preview of the bridge, just to give you guys an idea as we go through some of these aesthetic options, how it will look in place. So the first option highlighted in the red box is that of a vertical aesthetic element on the center pier containing the Englewood logo. So the decision here is either yes to a monument feature or no to the monument feature. The next option is to select a bridge barrier type. So this bridge barrier is intended to keep people and objects from falling through the truss and off the bridge. So the first option shown here is to use vertical pickets, which you can see in this top drawing on the bridge as a whole, and then the bottom picture is a real-world example. So the second bridge barrier option is a wire mesh. This would utilize fence panels that contain something like a 2-inch by 2-inch mesh. And then the last option to choose from is a few color options. So I'll note in all of these options, we're keeping the steel truss as weathered steel, so it's like a rust colored. This is the lowest cost option up front, as well as it has significantly less maintenance needs in the future. But the first option we have on this slide is shown as painted black vertical pickets and painted black approach fence. So on this slide, we have the green option. So again, it's green pickets and a green fence. And then the last option would be to use weathered steel vertical pickets. And with this one, we would keep the approach fence as painted black. So
I feel like I'm in a doctor, an optometrist asking this or that or this.
Yeah.
So.
And we can go back through it like that if you want.
So do you want us to take them one by one? So the monument feature
Exactly.
versus none. Okay. So that's the first one. Member Russell might have been first there.
Thank you. So I have a question. Is it painted or is it powder coated?
I'm not exactly sure.
Because powder coated will last much longer than paint.
Yeah, I haven't spoken with the manufacturer. I'm sure that they have like a standard that they use, but that's something that we can
Director
talk to them
DeAndre
about.
might be coming up to answer that.
We'll certainly specify that it is powder coated.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, so monument feature versus none. I don't get what the monument is supposed to add to it. It's kind of, is it something more than just something? What is it supposed to be?
It's just an aesthetic
It's just an
element.
aesthetic
Yeah.
feature to make it so it's not so, and it's a little off-center, which is fine.
Yeah, so the pier is placed on the existing median, so it doesn't interfere with traffic.
Yeah.
Should we raise hands, or are we?
Yeah, well, let's hear. Let's go down I mean, you really are asking, do you all want to weigh in on this, or would you rather them just decide? Councilmember Cuesta, you're about to say something.
I think I'm a little bit more biased towards slapping an Inglewood logo on anything, and I know that there's contrary perspectives on there. That makes sense too. So I don't mind putting the city symbol where we can, where it makes sense. Is that the only option for a monument feature? It seems that we've got, I assume that would be a concrete structure that's hung on there.
Yep.
Could we put it directly onto the pier itself?
So the monument we have shown is resting on the pier. So
Sure.
what we would do is extend the pier beyond the width of the bridge and then add these, vertical, basically just continue the concrete up the side to add that vertical element.
I see. So, for instance, a logo couldn't be attached directly to the fencing itself? Or would that just be hideous? And you guys threw that one out already, which I wouldn't blame you for.
I think there's potential for that.
This is one of those things where as I look at it here, I'm struck by the difference, and I can see it. Sometimes I wonder if I was just driving down the road, if I would notice these things, or if the average citizen would. What was the cost associated with this?
I don't. What do you think?
It's probably a few thousand, probably 4,000 to 5,000 for something like that.
I think I'm indifferent.
How about if we do this? Thumbs up if you want a monument feature with the Inglewood logo. And thumbs down if you don't. And if you don't care. I actually think if we have a choice, get one, put one. I don't know, Mayor Pro Tem, yes or no? Everybody do it all at once. What?
Yes, the monument feature.
You like the monument feature?
Yeah, yes, the monument feature.
Okay. I think that was 4 of us, right? Yeah. Okay, monument feature. On to the next. The next is the vertical pickets versus the wire mesh, right? So I think my thing is I like to have things be sort of see-through. And I don't know why I thought it was going to look like, like that one, the blue one below, that is the mesh, right? Mm-hmm. And the top one is also the mesh, but it just looks, I guess it looks so different when you see it from afar that it does look sort of busy.
So on the bridge that we're proposing,
on
the bridge that we're proposing, the wire mesh would not extend above the truss. So I don't know if that's why you're kind of seeing it different. The picture on the bottom is bridge at, I think it's Barnum Park in Denver, and those pickets I think are that wire mesh fence is 8 feet tall.
And that's what we would do too if we did it with mesh?
We would do a 5'8" inch.
So
tall,
the same
it would be
as
flush with the top of the truss.
Okay.
But there's another. I have another. Earlier in the PowerPoint, we had. There's another example of like the wire mesh that's a little closer up, if you can see that better. But yeah, there's kind of like different ways you can implement it. But
oh, I see how that is now. It's contained inside of it.
yeah, and the proposed bridge, the fence would be on the inside of it,
Okay.
of the truss.
I don't know if it was Member Wink or Ward, so I'll go with Wink. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm absolutely sure you've thought through this and worked through this, but I'm concerned about people flinging themselves off this. I just want to make sure. I'm concerned. So can you please alleviate my concerns about the ease between the two of those options of somebody jumping or climbing or?
Yeah, I mean, both options are designed to be difficult to climb. The reason we don't have like horizontal elements in these is so that you can't climb it easily. So the wire mesh is, we would do like a 2x2 opening such that somebody couldn't like put their feet into it and climb it that way. And then the vertical pickets are just, vertical steel rods that are just going to be difficult to climb. So.
Yeah. Okay.
You partial to one?
Yeah, I love the vertical thing. Yeah, that one looks classier to me.
Anybody else? Member Ward?
Keeping in mind my previous statements about my lack of understanding of the aesthetic, I prefer the wire mesh.
Member Cuesta?
Did you guys give us a price on the difference between the two of these?
No.
Do you happen to know?
I think they would be pretty similar, though.
I'll go pickets if that's the case. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, do you have your hand up? No?
Yep, I do pickets.
Pickets? Okay. I'll do pickets too, so there you got a consensus for pickets. All right, on to the next one. It's a color, right?
Mm-hmm.
Black or green, right?
Black, green, or the last option would be to use the weathered steel on the vertical pickets on the bridge. But we would still keep the painted black fence. Yeah, the approach fence.
So weathered steel looks like
It's like a rust color.
rust, and then, so really we're talking about a rust color versus black
Mm-hmm. Or green.
or green. Go ahead, Member Cuesta, you're thinking about it.
The green, please. And that's where the powder coating comes in? That particular fence would be powder coated in green? I think I'm going green. Thank you. I assume no substantial difference in cost, similar to the last one. Thank you.
Can we see it with, is it black and green otherwise? That's the other one?
This would be black all the way through
Okay. Inside of the
bridge.
steel.
The truss, yeah.
What truss, okay. I don't know, Member Russell?
Are the trusses that rust color, or are they green also, if we choose green?
Yeah, the truss would be weathered steel, so the rust color in all options, and that's because it's cheaper up front, and it's also much less difficult to maintain. Because if the bridge is painted, we would have to repaint it, say, every 10 years, and that would involve traffic control, and it's much easier to paint the
But if it's
the
powder
fencing.
coated, you don't have to paint it every 10 years. I think. Thank you.
But is what we're talking about is steel, the steel trusses is on everything, and that's a rust color. It's what we want with it, green or black.
Yeah, exactly. It's what you want the barrier inside of the
Yeah.
truss to be, and the adjacent fence, the approach fence.
So we have to decide on that part of it.
Mhm.
Which one is inside? I don't know. Green seems weird, but that's just my thing. You
That's what I
green?
like about it.
That's what you like about it. Okay, well, that's another reason to do it then. You like the green because it looks weird, or unusual, and you pay attention to
It
it.
pops. It's kind of loud.
Pops, yeah.
I don't know. I like it.
I liked the green the least when I first looked at the three, but it seems, I think in that vein of popping, I think out there in real life, it probably will look the best.
Member Cuesta.
For what it's worth, I actually imagine many folks in this room travel that intersection often enough. It is drab. It is
look at the one
quite drab. So that's why the green kind of stood out to me, is that it does provide some contrast and some color.
So you like it? Member Russell, do you care? No. Mayor Pro Tem, I don't care either.
Green.
Green it is. All right, next one, last one. No,
That was
That's
all
it.
three we needed.
you got it. Super. We're going to look forward to seeing that up there. It really is going to make a difference. Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much for asking us. It's kind of fun to pick colors after a dogfight. No. All right. Next item is our item 5, which is a 911 call diversion, and Police Chief Sam Watson. Congratulations again, and Division Chief Vance Fender, and Division Chief Chad Reed, and Sergeant Reed McGrath and Dispatch Manager Carrie Parman are here to present and discuss the progress the police department is making on the 911 call diversion recommendations from the Police Reform Task Force. Thank you, everybody. It's great to see you all. You have to turn it on and speak really close.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and members of council. We're seeing if we can queue up the PowerPoint here. Thank you. As you'll see on the PowerPoint, call diversion study began way back in 2020, where the co-responders were looking at better way to handle persons in mental health crisis. You'll also remember that this is a police reform task force recommendation. So we'd started the study prior to the police reform task force, but their recommendation is that we continue that. Call diversion is provides a higher level of service to the community, and it's an improved way of looking at people that are in mental health crisis. What you'll see and hear during this presentation, there's actually two different programs that are similar yet different. The first one is the formal mental health call diversion program. It's a national program. It's actually being piloted in Denver and Colorado regionally. The second program that you'll hear is a work that we're doing to evaluate the calls for service that come into the police department, and it's a program that we're looking at to see if we're handling them in the most efficient and effective way. So there's actually two different programs that we're going to present tonight, but we'll start with the mental health call diversion program.
Thanks, Chief. We have been working with Rocky Mountain Crisis Partners on this project, as the Chief mentioned, since February of 2020. Of course, COVID got in the way of a lot of that, and it's been a process to get to there. RMCP is the designated crisis call center in Colorado. It looks like they'll be the designated 988 call center when that comes through in about a year. Some of you are probably familiar with that program, where we'll have a new number for mental health calls where people can call 988. Of course, we know they're still going to call 911 as well, so we want to be prepared now and in the future to deal with calls that are appropriate to handle and be sent to Rocky Mountain Crisis Partners. So we'll have a screening process, and Carrie's going to talk about that. RMCP is nationally accredited by the American Association of Suicidology, and they have quite an experience and keep quite a number of statistics in terms of the work that they do. We feel that call diversion provides a better response to people in our community needing mental health services. Police officers do receive specialized training. Many of our officers are CIT trained, but that training is not to the level that we find at a true mental health facility like this, where they have very specific training. This is really what they do. They offer 24/7 counseling, resources, and referral to a mobile crisis program called SAFI. And SAFI has worked with Denver Department of Social Services for a number of years, doing investigations for their child welfare unit. SAFI basically extends our co-responder program into a 24/7 model, although it's much slower traditionally than our co-responder program is. A response through the Rocky Mountain Crisis Partners based on a call diversion is going to take a longer period of time. We really are interested in decreasing our contact with the public when it's possible, and it's in their best interest not to do that. When people are referred to the right resources and the right help, we have less interaction with them, less potential for use of force, and it allows our officers to focus on being police officers and dealing with crime issues. And officers will respond anytime that the public is in danger, and we're going to work with our officers in terms of making this kind of a wraparound program where not only can we do call diversion to it, but when an officer goes on to a scene and determines that there isn't a crisis, there's a mental health issue, but not a crisis that they're going to have to intervene in, they'll be able to actually refer people to Rocky Mountain Crisis Partners to help them. So we get a lot of calls, especially in the evening and overnight hours, people who are kind of lonely and they just call for various things. They just really need somebody to talk to, or they have some identified needs that they need help with. And this should really help that. So, and we envision that this program will have the ability to wrap around with our co-responder program as well, so that we can do referrals both ways. We'll get referrals back, hopefully from Rocky Mountain Crisis Partners at times, so that we can do outreach. Our co-responders can do outreach with people that have needs in the community. And Carrie is going to talk about it some more and how their calls are screened.
Just a friendly reminder to please be sure to speak closer to the mic. Thank you.
Were people hearing that okay? It was kind of quiet. All right.
It was coming through, but.
All right. You have to sit really close to it, or pull it up as close as you can.
Okay, so hopefully, okay. So on the dispatch side of this is where we come into play about how we're going to be screening these types of calls. So incorporated into our computer-aided dispatch system, there will be a flow chart, and there will be a flow chart with the dispatch protocols that are developed in partnerships with both entities that we're going to be using. So it will not be just random questions that the dispatchers will be asking to formulate if we're going to send this call to Rocky Mountain or if it's going to be a police response. So it'll be dispatch questions that are developed and vetted by the professionals to make sure we're asking the appropriate questions before we send them off. We're going to be tracking the type of calls that we're sending over. So we've identified certain problem type incident codes that will be asked of these questions. From there, we'll identify if they're a first party caller calling about themselves or if they're a second party caller calling about a friend or a family member. Once we code that and we send it off, we'll also be tracking if we have return calls. So if we transfer that call to Rocky Mountain and they've determined something has happened in the midst of that phone call conversation with that person that it needs to come back for a police response, we're going to be tracking that as well. What comes back? Is it the first party caller that's coming back? Is it the second party caller coming back? So that's how that will look on the dispatch side. So you may ask, what type of calls are we looking at diverting over? So one that comes to mind would be suicidal callers. They're sitting at home, they've had a bad day, they're having ideations or their thoughts about this, and we're screening that call. As long as there is nobody at the home with that person and they're not threatening any public safety, that would be a call that we would divert to Rocky Mountain. They are the trained professionals to talk to those individuals. And if for some reason that call needed to come back, then we would have all the details from that call that they spoke with Rocky Mountain coming back, so we would have the full picture.
We're working on another mental health call diversion program, and I hope this doesn't get too confusing because we're just looking at several different programs. But this program is actually being developed by All Health Network. They will entirely develop this, manage it, and fund it. And it's a program that looks like the STAR or the CAHOOTS program, and I think most of you are familiar with that. If somebody in our audience isn't, the STAR program in Denver has a paramedic and a clinician who respond to certain calls for service that many are mental health related. A lot are homeless related, so a lot of the homeless calls that we get, what we would call trespassing calls that are really minor trespassing calls, basically unwanted homeless, people needing resources beyond that. These kinds of programs address those needs. So we're really looking at, we have our co-responder program, that's not going to go away. Our 911 call diversion program will always 24/7 try to send those calls as appropriate to Rocky Mountain Crisis Partners, because again, the less we respond as police officers, the better outcomes we feel that will be for the community and for our citizens. But this program, it will be a 40-hour-a-week program when it starts, and it looks like they're working on doing this in Inglewood and Littleton, possibly Sheridan, and we're having discussions with them about our dispatch center actually dispatching the unit. But that's a lot of conversations that we're having, but we just wanted to get you kind of up to speed on what's going on with this program.
think you have to turn the mic on.
Oh. Is that better?
Yeah.
All right. Kind of shifting gears a little bit, not unlike mental health call diversion, we're also looking at call for service evaluation, where historically police officers have been tasked with a lot of calls over the years because they were out there and they were able to respond to these types of calls. So our purpose is to identify potential calls for service that may not require a police response or diversion to a crisis services model. We are very much in the early stages of this. We've developed an internal committee to start looking at calls for service that may meet the threshold for this call for service evaluation. This could be the development of probable cause or reasonable suspicion from the officer itself and not just the reporting party that's calling in. This is obviously heavily overseen by a sergeant or a master police officer. Our master police officers are in charge of a shift when a sergeant's not available. Obviously, the officer would have discretion on these calls for service, but the focus here is to determine whether or not there's a criminal element with these calls for service and do we need a police response. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I went too far there. This is obviously a cultural shift for us. For years and years, we have somebody calls in and we respond based on the caller's needs. But what we're looking at is there a more efficient or valuable method in this response? Can we divert these kinds of calls to other resources? We obviously want to provide additional resources if available. And there's also a communication piece here where we would call the reporting party back and explain to them why we were responding, why we were not responding, and a potential outcome. What does this look like moving forward? The goal is to shift calls for service to the appropriate nexus in order to utilize the most efficient use of resources available to law enforcement. And this could potentially decrease law enforcement's interaction with these calls for service. A good example of this would be somebody that called in and said there's somebody suspicious in my neighborhood. And that's all the information that the caller gives to dispatch. Well, what's suspicious about them? And the caller says, well, I don't know. They're just suspicious. I haven't seen them here before. Normally, we would respond to that and make contact with that person. The idea here, and this is just one example of many, is that the officer could respond, maybe park a block or two away, develop their own reasonable suspicion or probable cause before forcing that interaction with the person that this RP is calling about. Again, this is one of many. Another example could be somebody calls from Walmart. They had a shoplifter. They recovered the small amount of property that was stolen. They don't want to pursue charges, and they just want the person contacted and trespassed from the property. Do we really need to force that interaction? That's what this internal committee is looking to identify at this time.
So this is just a brief overview of those two programs, actually three if you throw in the STAR type program. And this is for your information only. We just want to let you know that we're in the planning phases and we're developing these, and we're available to ask any or answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Great, thank you for the presentation. Councilmember Russell.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the presentation. So what happens to calls for an ambulance or a medical emergency? Do they go through the same process, or are those 911 calls diverted to the fire department?
When a caller identifies that there's a medical emergency, we're automatically transferring them. We're getting the address and the chief complaint, and we're transferring that to Denver already. So if it's a medical issue, that's going regardless of what their mental health might be.
Okay, thank you. I guess my major concern has been all along is that these medical emergencies wouldn't get dropped through the cracks in the questioning process. I mean, is that possible for that to happen?
No, because the medical portion, first of all, we don't handle that. That does go through Denver. So when I'm answering the call and go with 911, what's the address of the emergency? And they give me the address, and we're asking what's going on there, that's when we're hearing, I need a paramedic, I need EMS. Okay, what's going on? I'm having chest pain. So then we're transferring that off. Then if Denver's line of questioning determines that there's not a medical issue at that address, they may do the return call to us to indicate that it didn't meet their threshold. I don't ever see that happening. That they would always send a paramedic. Once the paramedic is on scene, then they may request police assistance if it's more of a mental health issue.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mayor, could I just add to that, that
Go ahead.
we are not proposing any changes to that process as part of this call diversion process.
Member Questa?
Thank you. Thank you to the group. I really appreciate the presentation, and it was very objective, and I feel like it gave me a step-by-step overview on what would be changed in the direction this takes things in. If you feel comfortable doing so, I'd like to get your thoughts on it, Chief, or to the group, and how this would impact the force, and differences that this might make in daily operations for you. Do you see it as a positive? Any pitfalls that you might see to it?
Yeah, extremely positive. It's a better way of handling these types of calls for service. We have been and always will be, have the goal of having our officers CIT trained, crisis intervention training, which is an intense block of training for our officers to deal with people that are in mental health crisis. But this system, this program, will take that a step further and really get people that are in crisis to a mental health professional. If there's danger to the public, if there's any other source of danger, we can respond as well. We can be there with the mental health professional. So we're gonna make sure that the community's not at risk. But if there's no other risk, this really is a more efficient way of handling things.
Very good. Thank you, sir. I appreciate the work you guys do.
Anybody else? No more questions?
Can you go back to the previous slide about officers deciding whether or not something merits a response? I have to admit, this makes me a little nervous. One of my number one things as a council member is when I call the police, I want to see a police officer. And this looks a little bit like that might not happen or that might change. Is that correct?
The study is for certain types of calls, not all calls, but certain types of calls, especially ones where there's no criminal activity. There's a call for service that comes in where the person is doing nothing other than prompting a person to call. There's no, or possibly a very high discretion type of violation, and it's forcing interaction between that person and the police officer, when in reality, does that interaction really need to occur? So the officer, we're still going to take the call. It's going to come into dispatch. It's going to be dispatched through a supervisor. They'll review the call. Depending on the nature, like Division Chief Reed said, we can monitor the situation from afar without forcing that interaction. And if there is reasonable suspicion or probable cause, then we'll make that contact. But if there's one thing that we have to be careful of is that the police department is not being used to move forward someone else's biases. Just because they call doesn't mean we're going to go and contact that person. We're going to analyze it. We're going to look at it. The officer, the supervisor can contact the reporting person to get more information and really get to the crux of what that problem is before we make that interaction. So in some ways it can extend that call for service. It's going to make it longer because we're going to do we're going to do more front end work before we make that contact with the person.
I think I'd be more comfortable with the proposed process in general if the scenario you present where the officer pulls up and parks a block away or something like that before making contact. I'm not saying that I call and I say this person I don't recognize is in my neighborhood, come talk to him. I don't expect that. But when I do call the police and I say, this doesn't quite look right to me, I can't really fully articulate what doesn't look right about it, I'd like to hear back or see a car roll past my house or, something along those lines to assure me that you care about the request. I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at.
I understand, and we will follow up on the call. We just want to make sure that it's handled appropriately.
Yeah, there's a balance there, right? Any potential unforced interaction with the police officer is a potential revocation of liberty, temporary or otherwise. So I understand where you're at. Thank you.
Councilmember Russell?
Thank you. So I guess my concern would be, so how much time does this add to the whole process? Because what if there truly is an emergency that you're not aware of, that you haven't assessed until you've asked all the questions?
I'm not sure if I understand your question, but if it's an emergency, if it's expressed through the person that's calling the police dispatcher, of course we're going to respond right away if they can articulate some kind of emergency. If an officer's approaching the call and they recognize something that's emergency in nature, they're going to take immediate action.
So, I mean, it may not necessarily be, let's say somebody does call and say there's a suspicious person outside or whatever, but then you go through all of this, and then let's say the person did have a gun or something and was going to break into the house, but the person wasn't necessarily aware of it at that time, funneling it to someone else to deal with it when it needed a police officer. I mean, is it possible that a scenario could happen that a police officer really did need to respond at first, and perhaps it wasn't obvious?
Yeah, we make our decisions based on the information that we're given, based on our observations, based on our training. So the officers, as they respond, and take all that information into consideration when they're making the decision to contact somebody or not to contact somebody, or to take enforcement action or not to take enforcement action, or to detain somebody or not to detain somebody. So it's a totality of the circumstances, and part of it starts with the call that comes into the communication center, or if it's an officer-initiated activity, it's the officer's personal observations.
So if it goes through dispatch first, correct? I mean, so the dispatcher has to make a call first of all before it ever goes to a police officer about whether it's an emergency or not.
They receive the call, then they'll dispatch a police officer. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Member Wink.
Thanks, Mayor. I don't have questions. I just want to thank the team here tonight for your response to the recommendations made by the Police Reform Task Force. Not that I expected any less, but thank you for acting quickly, for coming up with what I saw is based around an underlying objective of efficiency and utilizing teams for appropriate goals or needs. So I think this is a great series of steps forward based on those recommendations, and in just moving our police force into forward, I guess, based on modern demand. So thank you very much, all of you, for the presentation tonight.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, did you have anything to add? Okay. Some of the most well-known cases that we've seen, and I'm sure this is what is leading to some of this too from the task reform, is our cases where someone called on someone suspiciously. Elijah McClain would probably be alive today if it had been handled differently and thought of not as an emergency but something else, and had not escalated to violence. So I really applaud your looking at it. I do think it's a culture shift, and I don't worry about you shifting culture really fast, because this is not something you were trained to do it like this. So I know you'll be careful in it. I think there's good hesitations that several of you have mentioned, but I think it's the right thing to do. And there's so many good models of where this is working well and putting you in less harm's way, you as officers in less harm's way as well. So I look forward to seeing what kinds of plans you come up with, and totally support your continuing to figure out how to do it best for Englewood. All right. I think we're done with this one. Come back with more another time. Although, member Queston, I realized tonight we might only have 8 meetings left, so got to come back soon. Next is up is agenda item 6, discontinued use of emergency alert sirens, and Division Chief Vance Fender, Senior Dispatch Manager Carrie Parman. Is this right? Yeah, same people, somewhat. Michael Durkin and Arapahoe County Emergency Operations Center are here to present and discuss continuing the use of the emergency alert sirens, which we all love.
Mayor.
Thanks,
yes,
Council.
somebody else too?
Yes, we also have Nancy Sharp online. However, I do have 2 of them, so I wanted to clarify.
I think she's on for the next one, right?
Oh.
The council member's choice for the open space tax
I
proclamation?
apologize. I believe
That's
you are
okay,
correct.
but Commissioner Nancy Sharp, if you want to jump in on this one, you sure could give us some of your perspective, but go ahead.
Thanks, Council. We appreciate your time tonight. We come to you tonight for some direction. Reference our outdoor warning sirens, or warning sirens. We've maintained these outdoor warning sirens for 30 or 40 years, I'm sure. They were replaced probably about 10 years ago with a new company because there were some FCC regulations that apparently the radio waves that we were using at the time to activate the sirens weren't proper. Is that right, Carrie? And so we had to do some changing back then. Since that time, the company that we used, the product we used, Federal Signal, no longer has a repair company in the state of Colorado. So all of the sirens that are in use throughout the rest of the state of Colorado by other municipalities are maintained by internal personnel at those municipalities. We discovered that last year when we had a siren that wouldn't turn off when it was activated. And we finally did get that turned off, and we found the only company that would come and do our repair was in Missouri, and for a $176 part, we paid almost $1,800 additional dollars in travel expenses just to have them come out and fix that part. Carrie talked to them a month or so ago about trying to do just a maintenance contract with them to come out. And it was over $2,000 in travel. That was what their quote was. And they could not tell us anything about any equipment charges because there is no vendor assigned sales representative for Federal Signal for these alert sirens in the state of Colorado. So we started doing a little bit of background on what could we use other than these sirens because I also used some documentation that Michael gave us from the Emergency Operations Center talking about emergency sirens and different ways of warning people about weather-related emergencies. Because as we all know, these warning sirens are used for one thing, and it's a tornado warning. So in our policy, the outdoor alert sirens have to be initiated by a member of the highest ranking member of the police department who's working at the time, and they're the ones that tells dispatch to activate the warning sirens. Well, I can tell you from personal experience that the time that I've had to call and make that judgment call, I got the alert on my telephone. And then I called dispatch and said, go ahead and light off the sirens. So that's from the wireless emergency alert system that goes to every cell phone in a geographical area for a tornado warning. And it's very specific on what that warning is, so there's a lot of information there. So that to us is the most accurate and most timely manner to get that information through is through cell phones, through that wireless emergency alert system. We can also utilize our Code Red system, which is known as a RAP alert, and Carrie and Michael can talk a little bit more to that. We saw how that was used in the water crisis when we went ahead and did the all clear, and it was not did not get to a lot of people, and there's some reasons for that we talked about. It's an opt-in system, so you have to opt in to get the alerts on your cell phones, or it's also reverse 911, where if you do have a landline, it does go to your landline, and that's how we use that. There's also the iPause system, which we also used during the water crisis at the very beginning. that had some issues that you guys are all aware of. And maybe Michael can talk a little bit to that, because he was the one that told us all about it to begin with. So again, we're just looking to see where council wants us to go with these emergency alert sirens, what direction you'd like us to look into further, and if there's any questions you have for Ms. Parman or Michael Durkin from the EOC.
All right, let's start with some questions for them. Any questions for them, and if not, what do you want to do on this? No questions for the three of them? Member Russell?
Thank you, Mayor. So originally, if I recall from the packet correctly, we originally took care of them ourselves, right?
I don't, not that we're ever aware of, that we ever internally maintained this system ourselves.
So if Denver, and there were a couple other municipalities in here that maintain their own, is it possible we could do it internally?
So when I called around, Denver, they have their own radio shop. So even with their law enforcement radios, they have their own radio system. They have a large radio shop that takes care of that. Lakewood is the same way. The city of Aurora is the same way. And actually Brighton and Commerce City, they operate in the same fashion, that they have a very large radio shop that takes care of all of that. And it would be a huge expense to the city to acquire that type of expertise.
Is it possible to do an intergovernmental agreement with any of them?
So our equipment is Federal Signal. Federal Signal has to award the contract. They awarded it to Blue Valley, which is who our current service vendor is. Until Federal Signal awards it to a different company that is closer, nobody in the state of Colorado will touch Federal Signal. So I've called all over, all down to Canyon City. There's a company down there. They will only touch what they manufacture and sell. So there's nobody in this entire area that will touch Federal Signal's equipment.
Okay. I mean, part of my hesitation in canceling this totally, we probably have a certain percentage of the population that does not have cell phones. And I mean, I'm assuming reverse 911 would work, but I know that we had trouble with reverse 911, and I don't know that we used it. I think we used it either at the beginning or at the end. I got a call from a couple of people that they didn't get it on either end, and they do have a landline.
So on the first part of that, we are the only municipality in the metro area of our size that has the alert sirens. Littleton does not. Greenwood Village, Cherry Hills, Sheridan, none of them have an alert system siren. The other part of that is it doesn't just come through the cell phones. It comes through radio. It comes through TV. That's where you have your break-in for a tornado warning. So it's not just cell phone driven. The other part of that is the cell phone, you're going to get it in the area that you are currently at. So you may not be in the city of Englewood, and you're going to get it on your phone. So there's those other avenues that the alert comes in, that it's not just cell phone driven. The second part of that, the reverse 911, it is an opt-in system unless you have a landline. If you're in the geographical area where the launch has been designed, then you would receive it. If you're outside of that launch area, then you would not receive it.
Okay, so, but does Denver does have sirens, right? They just don't have, because I do hear, generally, I think it's on Wednesday at 11 in the morning, I do hear the sirens go off. So that's probably Denver, correct?
Correct. So Aurora, Denver, Lakewood, they all test theirs on a monthly basis, and they do an announcement as to when that is happening.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I'm in favor of making the shift, and but with it, I would really like to make sure that the reverse 911 is working, and that we've really, I don't know if there's a way to test some of that and to make sure that we're getting it to the right people. I mean, the E. coli incident really did shake us up in terms of figuring out how to communicate better. So I don't know if we've learned some best practices from that that could really be utilized for this.
We have to a point, Mayor. One of the things that Michael and Carrie are really working on is we're going to launch with our communications department is really doing a big push to get people to opt into a RAP alert, the Code Red system. We're starting out that push at Celebrate Inglewood. Michael will be there handing out all sorts of documents about a RAP alert and Code Red, and then we're going to work with communications to really get that out to everybody that we can get that out to as the opt-in system for that system.
Others want to weigh in on whether you want to see this sunsetted or something else?
Can I just ask
Go
another
ahead.
question?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So whatever we decide that we're doing, is it possible to do a test of that system monthly to see how it's working?
Yeah, you can take that.
So the wireless alerts, that is not controlled by us. Those are pushed out. I can't tell you what entity pushes those out. Michael will be able to. Those are not controlled by us. Those are automatically sent out. So we wouldn't be able to conduct a test of that. The part that I would caution on the Code Red of doing a monthly test. Best practices is in Arapahoe County is other agencies are not using it for weather-related topics because of the size of the city, whether it's Littleton, and if Littleton's doing a launch and Inglewood's trying to do a launch and Greenwood Village is trying to do a launch, you're going to overbear the system. So the best practice that has been developed is that we're not utilizing it for weather-related incidences. The other part of that is if it becomes overuse for weather or monthly testing, when it does go out for a true shelter-in-place emergency, you may run the risk of people just thinking, oh, it's just another test or it's just weather. You're taking away that significance of a shelter-in-place alert versus what it should be. So that would be a caution.
Okay, thank you very much.
A point of information on that, though, is you can do it for the opt-in, right? You could test that and...
Yes, so Douglas County is also on the same system. They're doing a big media push for their county to say we're doing this monthly test or we're doing this test of the system. Monthly is incorrect. And Arapahoe, the dispatch managers have all agreed that we need to do that as well. And then that will be a communication push as well when that date and time has been set.
Great, thank you. Anybody else weigh in on this? Member Ward?
Have we considered the option of replacing it with something that is serviced locally?
We have not, no. I would imagine that, I want to say 10 years ago, it was about $80,000 to replace all of that equipment, from what I can remember reading. So no, we really haven't looked into replacing any of the sirens at all.
And does it have to be serviced annually, or does it only get serviced when it breaks down?
Well, we're only servicing it when it breaks down now because we don't have anybody that can come out and service it annually at a reasonable expense.
Okay, so like $3,000 or $2,000 in travel expenses over 40 years, that's $80,000. But so I mean, we could pay, to maintain it on a fixed basis annually at the crazy expense and still keep it. I guess that's kind of what I'm.
Yeah, you're right. At this point, with the $2,000 a year for their travel expenses for 2021, we could. We just don't know what parts we would need. And again, we're falling into this weird trap with this company that doesn't even have a sales representative that can sell us the parts for these sirens. It's a conundrum all the way around with these sirens.
Yeah, I guess I have a little bit of concern about just making the decision tonight to retire the system that's been in place for such a long time, particularly after we had issues with the emergency notification on the water system. So
that's kind of where I'm at right now.
And I completely understand that. I think that with the emergency weather alerts, it's a little bit different than that because it does come across so many mediums, not just cell phones, but radios and television and all sorts of things. So it's a little bit different than the communication that we gave with the water crisis.
That makes sense. I mean, it is sort of a 1970s technology, I would guess.
I would like to ease your mind a little bit. I've been with the city for 12 and a half years, and it's been activated 3 times in that duration for an actual warning that affects our 7 square miles, if that helps you.
Sorta. All right, thank you.
Go ahead.
Member
Go
Sierra.
ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think, so I would be in favor of sunsetting it, but I do have a question regarding just the alerts that come over the phone. And so I guess I'm just trying to understand, because I'm looking at my phone now, and you can turn off your Amber alerts, you can turn off emergency alerts, and you can turn off your public safety alerts within your notifications. So are iPause and Code Red both fall under those 2 government alerts, I guess?
They do. You are able to turn off all those alerts. The only alert you cannot turn off on your phone is the presidential alert, which you might all remember from a couple years ago. Otherwise, all those alerts you can turn off. That's a large part of the educational push that we'll be making, because we think when that first presidential alert went out a couple years ago, we think a lot of people went in and turned off their alerts because they didn't want the president texting them. And now we have to go kind of undo from that test from years ago.
I'm trying not to laugh. So I work at an institution that has about, maybe 13,000 people altogether, and we get a text message every month for a test, and then, things happen all week long that we do get texts sometimes 2 in the morning that a student has been hurt in some way. So I really believe in that system. I'm concerned about those who don't have that. And if it's a reverse 911, it sounds like we wouldn't use that for weather event, and it really would be by the other kinds of forms of media and neighbors and so forth. And okay, I just want to make sure that's what we're looking at. And I mean, weather is a big thing that people watch all the time. People seem to know more than I do, even when I do have a bazillion alerts on my phone that I don't pay attention to, even though I set them.
So yeah, everything you've said is true. One thing we are trying to educate on, and something a lot of people don't know about that reverse 911 system, is multiple phone numbers can opt in and multiple emails can opt in to one address. So if you had an elderly relative who lived in Englewood, you could opt in to their address. So even if you don't live in Englewood, you get that text message saying, hey, this thing is affecting your grandmother's, your great uncle's home. So it is available as well for kind of caretakers and family members, and we've seen people sign up and utilize the system in that way.
All right. Member Ward, did you have anything more?
I don't have any additional questions. I do have some
Your light
comments.
is on there, so go ahead then. Do you have more to say?
I'd be willing to entertain changing to something else, but I'm not prepared to make that decision tonight. I think we should investigate some other options, like replacing the equipment or servicing it annually. Part of that is I share Member Russell's concern that there's a particular demographic in our city that would be critically affected by something like a tornado that might not get the warning on a cell phone or other electronic device. And I think the siren serves that purpose. So that's where I'm at tonight.
So what would you need to bring back? Let's figure out what they would need to bring back in order to help us make a decision. Unless everybody's fine with sunsetting. I don't think everybody is. So you want to see some other options besides sunsetting and costs?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Anybody think of anything else? Does that help you? Maybe bring back costs that it would be to, I don't even know if you can fix it. If not, what does it cost to actually buy a new system? What is it? Yeah.
We can definitely look into cost for an entire new system. I'm fairly certain it's going to be significant. And we can look at that, and we can try to, I mean, we've called and done about everything we can do to see if we can get these maintained by anybody else, even in the state of Colorado, and so far we're just at a standstill, but we can definitely look into just an entire replacement of the system.
I think Member Russell mentioned an IGA as well. I heard you say parts is the challenge there, but if there are other radio shops around town that might be willing to help us out, that would also be useful to know.
Sure, yes, sir. It's not just parts, and it's really realistically that these larger agencies that have their own in-house electronics experts, that's what they do for their cities, along with their emergency operations and their radios and all of that. They just don't have the same system we do or the same parts.
Right, but what if they expanded into our area? I mean, we have our fire is through them, so what if they extended their system, you know, to 3, 4 sirens in Englewood? What is the cost of that? I don't know if they would even consider it, but.
I don't know, we can look into that, say with Denver, and see what they do. I mean, we've got 5 locations throughout town that we have sirens at. So I would hate to go down to a number, you know, to cover that. But we can look into that.
Well, as Member Russell said, we live in a part of town where we hear Denver's probably before we hear Englewood, so maybe you could actually have an efficiency of scale there without having to do some parts of it where we're right next to it, if we're sharing, if we're doing. But anyway, I think it sounds like that's what we want to come back before we push it along to, yes, sunset it.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much. And it's good to see you again, Michael. Yeah. All right. The next agenda item is council members' choice. And if you all don't mind, I would like to go to agenda item B for this so that our Commissioner Nancy Sharp can maybe go to bed. And so why don't we, if you don't mind, council, we need to review the proposed Arapahoe County open space tax proclamation. So I don't know. Yeah, City Manager Lewis is going to explain why this is coming as it is.
Thank you, Mayor. I really just want to point out that we we're using your process for the proclamation review, but actually the county has asked for a resolution. I think, you know, maybe it's 6 of one, half a dozen the other, and we'd like to hear your preference on that. But we were provided with a copy of a draft resolution. And have included that in your packet to be considered as either a proclamation or a resolution, your choice. But we wanted to bring that to you the meeting before it's put on the agenda per your recently approved proclamation policy. And Commissioner Sharp is on the call if you have any questions about the information in your packet.
Thank you, Commissioner Sharp. I know you had to wait up for this. You had many days like this yourself one time, so.
I certainly did. But thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Sure. Do any of you have questions for him, to her tonight, about what this means for them and the work in the open space? Councilmember Ward.
Has this been approved for the ballot by the commissioners already, or is that coming up?
No, it has been. We had a unanimous vote to move it to the ballot for this fall.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right, so I have a question. So whether it's a proclamation or a resolution, what would that mean to you all? Does it matter?
I don't think it matters. I think the most important thing to us is we'd love to have your support going forward, and whether that's a proclamation or a resolution, either way, I think it would be very much appreciated.
Okay, great. So council, how would you like to proceed with this? Do you want to have a proclamation or resolution?
I think we should talk about the content a little bit first.
Yeah, the content is there too. So, okay, so I know we had let's start with that. So Member Ward, you want to kick us off?
Yes, I have an objection to the last 13 words of this proclamation, and encourage our residents to vote yes during the November 2021 general election. I am with it up to that point. I am not okay voting as a body to tell our residents how to vote.
All right. Councilmember Cuesta.
I'll support that. I generally also prefer to have our constituents give us their opinions on how things should go, and not the other way around. Thank you.
All right, but you wouldn't mind the rest of it saying that we support it?
Correct.
But we just want to tell people they should support it. Okay. Anybody else? Member Russell.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner Sharp, for being here. Good to see you again. I do support this, but I agree that I think if it's unanimous by the council in supporting it, we wouldn't necessarily need that statement.
Okay. And Member Wink, same?
I support it.
And you want to see those 13 words taken out?
Either way.
Yeah. And Mayor Pro Tem, are you still on? I can't see you because I see our lovely commissioner. Go ahead.
No, I support it as well. I guess I'll just bring up a question, Commissioner Sharp. Remind me again, in terms of the tax, there is no time limit on it. Is it in perpetuity, or is it for the next 20 years? I can't remember what was decided or what came forth.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It is a ballot measure is in perpetuity or permanent. And you know, I always say permanent, but you know, anything can be brought back to the voters and you know, go back to the voters if things change 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now. It certainly should go back to the voters.
Okay, I appreciate that, Commissioner Sharp. I'm in favor, including the changes that were mentioned by Member Ward.
All right, so I'm fine with that too. So we'd bring it back without the last phrase, but we would be proclaiming support for the open space ballot measure at 1A. So do you care if it comes back as a resolution or as a proclamation? That'd be the next question. Member Quest, I'm sorry if I missed your light. Do you care? Resolution feels like it's a bit stronger of support, but if you don't want to do it that way, proclamation it would be. Anybody care? Councilmember Cuesta.
I'll support either way. I don't have a preference which one it comes back as.
Okay. Others? Mayor Pro Tem?
Resolution is fine with me.
Okay.
Mayor, I think with the what we heard from each council member, we can put this on a consent agenda as a resolution. And I should have mentioned that this was also reviewed by the City Attorney's Office and our Parks, Recreation, Library, and Golf Director.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd want it under consent. If we want people to know that we're supporting it, and we're not saying, encouraging them to vote, but we're proclaiming we don't do this very often. So I'd like more in the consent agenda, but on this one, I think it might be smart not to put it there. But
I do have one other question regarding the clauses, and that is the amount of the tax doesn't appear in this proclamation from what I can tell. It tells how much it generates, but it doesn't discuss it. This is a relatively tiny sales tax from what I understand.
it is, it's like 25 cents on $100, right? So I don't know what that percent is, but that could be included in this. Can we get that?
A quarter of a cent.
It's a quarter of a cent on a dollar? Okay, well, obviously, yes. 25 cents on 100. Thank you for doing the math tonight. Yeah, that would be good to have in here, I think, for people to realize what a tiny amount can actually make such a huge difference in our open space and quality of life here. Great, let's include that and then bring it back as a resolution, and we will vote on it publicly in regular. Wonderful. Thank you, and Commissioner Sharp, thank you for being here and staying up with us.
Well, thank you all very much. Really do appreciate it, Mayor and council members. We really do. All the support means a great deal. And, I think it is important to just say again that, and Commissioner Warren Gully probably said it to you, but there are annual audits and we have a citizen advisory board. So I think there are lots of things that that citizens and all of us as citizens and residents can feel confident that this money is going to be spent appropriately. And so just really appreciate your support. Thanks very much.
Thank you, and just a big plug for the Open Spaces celebration on the 17th, Friday, right? That early morning, 7 a.m. with a pancake flipper out there and everything. It's a fun event celebrating all the great work that is done through this fund.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I think when people, particularly during COVID, you know, when we were trying to be outdoors as much as we could, I think people have a much stronger appreciation for what we valued anyway. But it meant a whole lot the last year and a half, more probably than it has. So
True. Well, thank you.
Look forward to seeing you there. I hope everybody will join us.
Yes, hopefully we'll get a few out this year. Thank you for hosting that too. Thank you very much for coming tonight. And so we'll move on to agenda item 7A, which is discussing appointment of one or more council members to the CodeNext Steering Committee. So I think Member Anderson raised this last time, and we need to just get a feel for what people think about this. Councilmember Russell.
Thank you. Is the entire Planning and Zoning Board also on the CodeNext Commission?
I believe so, isn't that right? And then added citizens, right? Yeah.
I believe that's correct.
And so I would think, and maybe this is a question for the city attorney, because we're two quasi-judicial boards, if both representation from both committees should be on it. Because normally, we're discouraged from going to any planning and zoning meetings.
That's a really interesting question, Councilmember Russell. If you don't mind, I would like to look into that because I do think you make a good point. So let me see what's required versus what's advisable and get back to you if you don't mind.
That's fine with me. Thank
Great.
you.
No, I would like to weigh in. I'm hesitant. I think like maybe what you're, I don't know if you're hesitant or not, but I am really hesitant about messing with this because it's planning and zoning and citizens, and it's set aside to actually look at it and bring stuff to us, not to make decisions, but to give us some recommendations. And I would like to stay distant from that process. I think it would be healthier for this council to be able to think on its own and not have one or two council members trying to convince us of something or another. But I'm not going to be on council when it finally comes out to us either. But it makes me really uncomfortable. This is different than the police task force and other things that we put together. That's why I feel that way. But anyway, it'd be great to get a legal perspective on what's right or what might be more cautious. I don't know. And I think Member Anderson would enjoy having that conversation anyway, so he would prefer us not to be talking about it tonight. So that's good that we kicked it down the road.
I think, can I add something, Mayor?
Go ahead.
I think whether or not it's allowable might depend on whether or not they're acting in their quasi-judicial capacity. I think that, to me, is going to be the question. Is a discussion group acting in a quasi-judicial capacity, or is it allowable for members of two quasi-judicial boards to be in the same room discussing their business? I'd be most interested in the answer to that question.
And I'll add on to that. It might be because what is the process going to be? Is this group going to really create some ideas, and then is it going to go to planning and zoning and that then affirms it, and then it comes to us? And it would be really awkward to, I think that spelling out that process would probably be really good for us too. Yeah. Okie doke. On to 8, reports from boards, commission, council liaisons. Does anybody have any tonight? Member Russell.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple. I had 2 committee meetings in the last couple of weeks. Code Enforcement Advisory Committee met last week, and they've been working on changes to the tree and shrub code. And so they should be recommending some changes to the tree and shrub code soon. I mean, the next step is to email me, and then it comes to council, I believe, is how it works, and then we decide. So then what happens after we would decide to move forward what they want, then the city attorney would work with that board, I think, to work on those changes. Is that correct? Is my understanding correct on that?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, you are.
Thank you. So that's what Code Enforcement Advisory Committee has been working on. The other board that I sat on met a couple weeks ago as well. It's Non-Emergency Employees Retirement Board. And there have been a couple changes in the last 6 months, really, to the investment strategy. There was a $9 million unfunded pension liability, and so last November, that board voted to amortize that $9 million over 15 years. And I had talked last week with Director Loh about this, and she reached out to Paul Wood, who is the GRS Consulting. He's the actuary, and he found that our NERP board is well managed for the following reasons. And one is we have a short amortization period for the actuarial accrued liability of 15 years. And also we have the lowest discount rate at 6% among the peers. So I believe that the NERP board is doing a very great job in managing the pension fund for those retirees. So thank you very much.
Great. Or any others? Go
Just,
ahead.
just a note, I sit on the Parks and Rec Commission, as I mentioned earlier. Scheduled and unscheduled public comment are a part of every single Parks and Rec Commission meeting. So there was a statement made earlier tonight that people did not have their chance to have a say. I just wanted to point out that scheduled and unscheduled public comment occur at every Parks and Rec Commission meeting.
Point of information, Mayor. I would like to correct that. What I asked was the steering committee if they had public comment. They did not. I was not reflecting on the Parks and Rec board at all. So if that was in reference to me, I did not say that. Thank you.
It certainly was not, Member Russell.
I'm sorry, I just have to laugh. Okay, on to anybody else that has anything here? No? All right, so any further council members' reports? Anything else that you want to speak to other than your boards and commissions? Member Russell.
I do have a council request. I don't believe if the Title 16 steering committee videotaped their meeting, it wasn't uploaded the other day. And so I'm wondering if it did get videotaped and it just hasn't been uploaded yet.
I know that those are being recorded with the newest committee that's been formed, but we'll check on why that wasn't uploaded.
Okay, thank you. And is it video recorded or just audio recorded?
I can't answer that. I
Okay.
just know it's recorded, but we'll get that answer for you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And then just one other thing I think maybe we need to address, and on the Zoom meetings and the hybrid meetings, I know that in some of the committee meetings that council members turn off, or committee members turn off their videos. And so I'm thinking that part of our policy should include that the videos have to be on to make certain that the committee members are doing the job that the citizens want them to do.
I have to say that I was on Water and Sewer Board for a long time, and also Keep Englewood Beautiful for a long time when we had people call in and you didn't have to be on a video. So I think there's bandwidth issues. We experienced that amongst ourselves. I would hate to have our participants not be able to participate if their bandwidth isn't allowing video, but they can listen in and vote. But I certainly can appreciate the perspective if you're doing some kind of, executive sessions is where it made me the most nervous who was in the room. But I think we can ask and encourage that, but I don't think setting it as you have to have the bandwidth to be able to do it is probably not going to be possible.
I think that you can actually call in. And so if you do call in, I guess the video is not there. So.
Mayor, can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
So the council request would be, can we request that board members turn on their video when possible?
No, actually, I was just asking if council wanted to discuss perhaps. I know that when city council met totally on Zoom meetings, you always would ask Mayor for us to make sure the video was turned on.
Yeah, I think the public expects that. And
So, and that's really all I was saying in relation to the board and commission
Yeah.
meetings also.
I mean, I know on Water and Sewer Board, we have one person who has little kids, and she's not wanting, and we had one night that was breastfeeding, and so there are things that I think just happen, and I don't know, I don't want to make our boards and commissions have to be that. And I think most people, well, I don't know how many people are going back. I don't know if they are. We had a hybrid the other day with people in and out. But I would not be in favor of requiring it. I would say strongly encourage, have them on if your bandwidth allows for it, and that's our expectation. Anybody else? All right. Anything else from anyone? I wanted to just reflect on last week. I thought it was a fantastic week with lots and lots going on. We had, my gosh, you all were at some of them, but to see our chief retired properly with a great event. It was wonderful to do it in the building with him, that he helped to get us going. I hadn't even mentioned that, but I think we've mentioned it in some ways, but to be able to see him there in the building and then bring Sam Watson, our new chief, on, that was great fun too. We also had a police reform task force update on Wednesday night, and I thought it was very well done. I thought staff did an excellent job of explaining what has transpired over the last, how many months? 8 months? I don't know. And I appreciate that kind of an update ongoing. Let's see what else happened last week. There was a Tri-County health discussion that I was involved in on early Wednesday morning, 7 a.m. to 9. They're trying to get, and you all might have gotten, council members were supposed to get a request to join one too, but they had mayors together on one Wednesday to talk about how we move forward with Douglas pulling out and thinking about whether they would split the counties up or whether continue with Adams and Arapahoe County. So if you have something in the next week that you can go to, they really, really are looking for our input on that and our different perspectives. And my perspective is I'm concerned that we're going to split our public health up so much that we can't manage things together very well, as we had a difficult time doing through the worst of COVID. Then the Emerson Park had a grand opening on Saturday morning. That was very fun to see that whole park open and to see the people who volunteered, who really kind of were the instigators to get that considered as one of the projects. And then the last thing is I was at Randy Penn's memorial on Saturday. It was a good event with lots of people there, family. It was a good closure, I think, for everyone. It was special to do it in the Penn Stadium. So I'm sure some of you were there. I'm not sure I saw everybody, but if you're thinking of the Penn family, they still could use your prayer and support. So that's it for me tonight. Anybody else? All right, city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have, 2 items now. The Department Administrator and Community Development said, Nancy Fenton said she did just check, and you are correct, Member Russell, that is not, was not uploaded. She has already uploaded it since your comment was made, so thank you for pointing that out. But we will go ahead and respond to that council request in case there's something that needs to change in terms of process. The second item is I think I've talked to all council members except for one with regard to our trash hauling RFP. As you recall, you looked at the trash hauling RFP about a month or 2 ago and gave some direction with regard to that. They placed a 1% cap on the ability of trash haulers to increase costs year over year and put a limit of 1%. As you recall, the trash hauling committee had a group of trash haulers that they interviewed, they asked questions of, had correspondence with. Councilmember Ward can probably tell more about that process. And some of those companies have reached out to us and indicated that they do not plan on responding because the 1% cap is so far outside the industry standard for gas, for other costs that are on a higher rate than 1% just based on inflation alone and or other costs that are outside their control. Another company said that they would front load the cost so much up front that it would probably be undesirable for the city to consider it. We are concerned that we have an RFP that is going to result in either no responses are responses that are very expensive in the upfront, and would like to offer an alternate bid. So go ahead and ask exactly what we brought to council, but also provide language in that RFP that's an alternate bid for 3% max or CPI, Consumer Price Index. And so that is our intention, and what I'd like to do is just make sure that if council has any objections to that you let us know that. That's how we would like to proceed. I don't know that that takes a vote, but I'm open to that discussion as well. But we just wanted to make sure that we let you know that we are following your direction, but we also, based on the feedback that has been provided, would like to provide that alternate bid. Last comment on that, keeping in mind that 1%, if let's say we have a $25 bill, is 25 cents per year. So we're talking about very, very small amounts, whether it's 3% or 1%, it is a relatively small amount, but we just want to make sure we have council guidance on that as needed. Thank you.
Thank you. City Attorney's report.
I don't have any report tonight.
Thank you. All right, everybody, this meeting is adjourned, and I found my gavel. And all the best to you in the next week. We don't have a meeting next week, remember, so you have a week off. Be well, everybody.